All right. Ready? Yeah. All right, if I could have everybody's attention, come to order, please. Shh. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Good afternoon. Welcome to your Trade, Commerce, and Tourism Committee. I'm joined by my two of my council colleagues, Councilmember Buscaino and Councilmember Bonnet. First, I want to apologize that we're getting started a little bit late today. We were all in council session. The homeless issue was on the docket, and it took quite a long time before council ended. So we all got here as fast as we could. We just jumped in the car right after session, didn't stop, didn't pass go, didn't collect 200, and we came right here. But I realized that some of you have been waiting for 20 minutes or more, and I wanted to apologize for that. And also, not claim responsibility for that. So, but thank you for being here. I'm excited about holding this TCT committee in Councilmember Buscaino's district. I want to thank you for hosting us, and thank the board of the Harbor Commissioners and the Harbor Department for sharing their meeting room with us in this committee room today. I'm looking forward to learning more about the LA Waterfront redevelopment efforts today. There's so much going on in this area, in San Pedro and in Wilmington, and much more happening in the future, that it's great that we get to review it and get to do it here in a field hearing. I've only been chair of this committee now a couple of months, and I'm committed to making sure that every year and whenever needed that we do the field hearings, and we come out, either come out to the ports or go out to the airport, whatever's necessary. Generally we have the meetings in City Hall, because that's where all the relevant City Hall staff folks are. But I think it's important that we do these kinds of field hearings, and we have a lot of important issues to go discuss today. Before we get started, I'm going to offer my colleagues, especially our hometown council member here, Mr. Buscaino, if you have any opening comments that you'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for agreeing to host or have this hold this field committee here in my district. There's so much happening, and I'm happy to know that we're going to get some key report backs on some direction that we asked port staff and city staff to report on that we initiated earlier this year. I want to thank Mr. Bonham for joining us. This is Mike's second home, and thanks, Mike, for joining us. And I want to also thank Commissioner Arian, who's here hanging out, running around, taking care of babysitting duties, and also Deputy Director Don Liu and his team here for having us here. And also each and every one of you. You are as equally as passionate as I am as it relates to looking at ways to redevelop our waterfront, and also holding each and every one of us accountable to get things done and to move. As you know, we've been laser focused on finding ways to bring retail, dining, entertainment along our waterfront. And my colleagues can attest to, I've just been beating this like a dead horse and trying to advocate and continue to advocate for progress. And I'm happy that we're going to hear a lot of progress that's being done as it relates to waterfront development in both San Pedro and Wilmington. So thanks again, Mr. Chair, for hosting or holding our field hearing here. And thank to each and every one of you who have dedicated some time here. I really appreciate each and every one of you for also being on the team to advocate for a change along our water line. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bonham, any opening remarks?
Just briefly, first of all, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me here. As the council member who represents the neighborhoods near LAX, I certainly understand what it's like to have a major asset and economic engine in your neighborhood, and the tension that creates. And so I'm glad to be here and make sure that we have a hearing here within the shadows of the port, just as no doubt we'll have one near the shadows of the airport soon. As Joe said, this is sort of a second home to me. This is where my in-laws are from. I got married at Point Furman Park last year, and my father-in-law, Commissioner Arian, is around here babysitting for me somewhere. When we do a committee meeting at the airport, Joe, I don't know if I can offer reciprocal babysitting services for you, however. So I will attest to the fact that Joe is Councilmember Buscaino is a constant force on the council for this area, for these neighborhoods, and particularly for waterfront development. I sit next to him, and I can guarantee you that he can work the terms waterfront development into almost any sentence, and to certainly onto any issue on the council floor. He's a tireless advocate for it, and I'm absolutely confident that this neighborhood's going to get exactly what it wants and deserves because of his leadership. So,
absolutely true. So most of the items today are on the port. We do have sort of three fairly administrative items 6, 7, and 8, that I would like to recommend for consent. However, we do have speaker cards on those items from the same individual, Mr. Martin Blank. So, Mr. Blank, if you would come forward to speak on those items. And generally speaking, we have 2 minutes per item for speakers, but as per council rules, we have a cumulative total of 5 minutes. So if you wish to use all 5 minutes up on these 3 items, you're welcome to, or you can use 3 minutes to cover the 3 items. There's no one else speaking on this subject.
Of a major interest to me.
The item number 6, you mean?
No, I mean item number 1.
We're not dealing with item number 1 now. You've submitted speaker cards for items 6, 7, and 8.
Right.
You can pass your time or you can use your time. What is your choice?
Well, I'd like to pass it, but if I'm called up here and speaking, you're not going on to item 1 now.
We're going to go systematically through each of the items
Okay.
in chronological order. We're taking items 6, 7, and 8 out first.
Okay, and so I'm
I don't want to have a discussion. Your choice is...
releasing that time.
You're releasing your time.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
So we have no additional speaker cards on items 6, 7, and 8. The item has been moved and seconded. Without objection, those items are approved on consent. Great. Now we will move to item number 1. Mr. Espinosa, would you please read item number 1 into the record?
Item number 1 is a report from the Chief Legislative Analyst relative to issues related to the San Pedro waterfront redevelopment efforts.
Thank you. And on this item, we do have quite a number, well, no, we have a couple of cards. 3 cards. So why don't we take the public comment cards on this item first? And I'll call up Elise Swanson, followed by Martin Blank, followed by Pat Nam. Yes.
How much time would you like for each?
2 minutes per item, 2 minutes per speaker.
Council
And
members, my name
cumulative
is...
of 5 per total. Go
My
ahead.
name is Elise Swanson. I'm president of the San Pedro Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here today on behalf of our almost 400 members to thank Councilman Buscaino for his leadership in helping to move waterfront redevelopment forward. We know as a chamber that we've been working, many organizations in this community, for almost 20 years on issues related to waterfront redevelopment. We go back to 2001, the Urban Land Institute report that talked about the synergy between the waterfront and the economic health of our downtown and San Pedro as a community. So we know how key this is. We're encouraged by the reports that we're hearing about the negotiations between the LA Waterfront Alliance and the Port of Los Angeles as they move forward, and hopefully we'll have a lease agreement signed by the end of December or early January. So we're very encouraged, and we thank the council member for his efforts in that area. We also know that tourism, and we'll be hearing about that today, is a key, and our redevelopment waterfront will help spur tourism in the community. The San Pedro Chamber is very excited to be moving forward with a partnership with the Port of Los Angeles on manning a cruise ship ambassadors program at the port. So between our redeveloped waterfront and our tourism activities, we are truly encouraged by the movement that we see. And thank you, Councilmember Buscaino.
Thank you very much, Ms. Swanson. Next, Martin Blank.
Thank you for the time to talk. I'd like to talk primarily about the waterfront development and what it entails, and the fact that there's an awful lot of background information that's required in moving forward, especially with the wireless aspect. There's been the country and the whole economy has jumped in with both feet and into wireless without really adequate support and background. The people who've been making the decisions about the protection of the public have been largely from the engineering and physics end, and the biologists have not been heard from. And yet, when one looks at the data, you see that the biological data are quite disturbing.
Mr. Chair, this has, hold this time, this has to do with San Pedro Waterfront Development, Mr. Chair.
You need to contain your comments to the item in front of us.
Yes, well, I think that the role of wireless in the redevelopment part is a very important component of this, and it's being used as, I guess, the way people are accepting it without taking into account that there are all kinds of pathology associated with the wireless in our environment. I don't know if that's been adequately dealt with in the plans that are on the table now, but there's a higher incidence of all kinds of diseases that have been showing up with people who are using this wireless. And I think that for that reason, it's something that ought to really be reconsidered before jumping in, I say, with both feet. Most people are accepting it as being protective, and yet the people who are making decisions of whether it's protective just don't seem to matter. People have not realized that the kind of damage that's done, especially to children at that level. They're very sensitive systems, and they respond with all kinds of damage. In adults, you have an incidence of cancer that are showing up with the presence of wireless. And we saw that recently with Vice President Biden's son. Although it wasn't publicized, his brain tumor was a direct result of overexposure to his wireless environment. I think it's important when one proceeds on a very big redevelopment project that these matters be reconsidered. People are rushing in, there's a great attraction, it's very useful, and so without thinking about the consequences.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, okay.
Okay, next we'll hear from Pat Nam. Apologize if I'm mispronouncing your...
It's Nave.
Okay, couldn't read the V, looked like an M, so I'll know that for the future, Mr.
No problem. Hey, Joe. A year ago, when we had a committee meeting down here, Councilman Buscaino stated at the end of his meeting that he wanted to see 5,000 high-end condominiums constructed down here in 20-story buildings or 200-foot-high buildings. And I am curious, I don't have a comment particularly on the efficacy of that, but I do want to know what these various things that have happened this last year, SB 63, 399, and so forth, whether they implement that or what's the status of that goal. Are we still going to see that, and if so, how and where? And hopefully it'll be addressed here today. And if not, I'd certainly be interested in getting an update on that, Councilman. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And it's certainly our intention to go through those items as part of this item. Next card on item 2 is item 1. Actually, I think that is the last card on item 1. So what I'd like to do, this item 1 has 8 different reports associated with it. So what we'll do is we'll call up various staff members one at a time to address the individual elements. And for the first report, I'd like to invite John Wickham of the CLA's office for a report on something that the gentleman just asked about, SB 399.
Yes, good afternoon. Every time I see Councilman Buscaino in City Hall, he says, "Hi, John, Waterfront." So to clarify for the record, my name is actually John Wickham, not John Waterfront. But just very briefly, the legislature passed SB 399 this year. One of the concerns with waterfront development is that the city charter actually constrains the ability of proprietary departments to contract, and that includes the airports, the harbor, and the DWP, to contracts no more than 50 years long. And one of the issues with significant economic development projects is that they see a life for that project beyond 50 years. So it's very difficult for a developer to step in and be able to, see a profit, see the results of their work within a 50-year time frame. So one of the things that has happened here is SB 399 actually in state law state law previously held a 50-year limit on contracts as well. So between the city charter and state law, we really had some significant constraints. SB 399 actually extended the ability of the Harbor Department to contract beyond 50 years. The limit is now 66 years, which provides additional time for a developer to come in and ensure that they're able to develop their project and see reasonable returns. So this is a significant step forward in being able to move economic development projects forward at the waterfront.
So what are the steps, though, now that we're authorized to do that, what are the steps that we need to take as a city to make that a reality?
Well, I understand that the city attorney needs to take a look at this, and we need to have some conversations with the city attorney. In the past, their concern has been this is a very clear 50-year limit. So we just need to follow up with them on that. Is this a 50-year limit, or is there any room? My understanding is there's no room, but we'll revisit that one more time. It's interesting, the city charter actually says that the contracting limit can be what the federal and state, whatever is provided by federal state law, or the 50 years, whichever is less. So the charter is actually really specific on this 50 years. So we would need to talk about that and see what some of the steps are to address the charter requirements.
So am I to understand that the state law is great because it now allows us possibilities, but we may very well need, in fact, I think you're suggesting that we do need a charter amendment in order to get to that next step?
That may be necessary. So we will circle back around with the city attorney, confirm what this state law does for us, and see if that gives us any room, and we'll go from there.
But previously, without the state law change, even a charter amendment wouldn't have allowed it.
Exactly. The State Lands Commission would absolutely not have allowed anything more than 50 years. So we're up to 66 now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, John, for your report. We met with some key folks in the development community earlier this year, also city staff, port representatives, and we heard loud and clear from the development community that in order for something to be more easily financeable, they were looking, one of the stumbling blocks was the 50-year lease that we have here through the state tidelands. And that it would be a heavy lift in the state legislature to overcome that 50-year lease. So I turned to my colleague, State Senator Isidore Hall, who's being represented here by Erica Velasquez. And I turned to Isidore and asked him to champion this effort to do everything we can to overcome this 50-year lease. Our ask was 99-year lease, but through compromise and through concerns that were addressed by the state staff and state tidelands, we compromised with a 66-year lease. And that was a big lift. In fact, it was just signed by the governor. It will go into effect January 1. And now, as indicated by Mr. Wickham, we need to sit down, and I have a call into the city attorney, Mike Fear, to sit down with him and look at the interpretation of this 50-year lease here in the city and as it relates to our leases at the port. Last resort, we'd have to go to the voters and seek a change in the city charter. So stay tuned on that front. But we feel that in a time when we're looking at other key parcels of property along the Wilmington and San Pedro waterfront, we feel that this extension of 50-year lease would be an added incentive to private investment to come down to our water line. John, if I can have you, can you share with us some of the, if you look at the developments around the city of Los Angeles, such as Hollywood and Highland and also downtown LA, parts on the west side, were they limited, these projects, were they limited to a 50-year lease?
No, they were not, because they were not on proprietary properties. So properties of the airport or the Harbor Department or DWP. Projects like Hollywood and Highland were on private property, for example. Some of the projects where they're leasing from the city, but they're not a proprietary department, we can do 99 years for that. So the Farmers Field project, for example, that was effectively a 99-year lease.
So I'm sure members of the audience are asking, 50 years, 99 years, I'm not even going to be around then. Can you explain the importance of the financing terms so that if you can just give us the Finance 101 to explain that longer leases pencil out financially?
I think you did it
Oh, I just did it.
perfectly just there, very simply and straightforward. And that's exactly what it comes down to. You know, developers are seeking financing from the private market, and so they need to be able to provide a return over a long period of time. And the initial startup costs to acquire land and to build out a project, to do all the design, do the sequel work, all of that, those are real high costs up front, and it takes some time over the life of a project in order to generate the returns.
Okay. And then we'll talk about ports of call here in a minute as an item come before us and how the 50-year term relates to the ports of call. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think it's important, especially with the dissolution of the CRA and a lot of the finance tools that we as a city had for redevelopment. It's important that we start looking at other tools and certainly removing, not only looking at creative financing tools, but removing impediments that are out there for important redevelopment investments. So we're thrilled that the bill is passed, and I know Joe and the rest of the council will work to take the necessary steps to move that one forward. So the second report, I'd like to invite Scott Page from Metro to speak about the service enhancements in San Pedro.
I believe I have a PowerPoint for this that I sent down.
Okay, is it loaded?
Scott, while you're working on that, can I just tee this up?
Sure.
So colleagues and members of the public who are here, as we all know, we've been calling for light rail to come down to the harbor area, San Pedro and Wilmington. We have and you would think it'd be easier since we have existing rail lines, right? Well, it's not. In a time where the city planners, county planners, and elected leaders 30 years ago looked at bringing rail to the harbor area, they completely bypassed us and went where? Long Beach, right? The Blue Line. Which has been great for the city of Long Beach. So we're nowhere near the Blue Line. It was important for us also to look at creating more public transportation options to the harbor area communities. And we worked with Supervisor Kanabe, Mayor Garcetti, in fact, MTA board member Bonin, who's before you, and thanks, Mike, for your help on this, to champion an effort to to extend the Silver Line down to San Pedro. So it'd be a direct link from downtown Los Angeles, which is another economic hub of jobs in that area, to bring that line to San Pedro. So we've made extraordinary efforts, and we're about there. And this was one of our efforts earlier this year that we directed MTA to look at finding a way to expand the public transportation to and from downtown Los Angeles and San Pedro. So, Mr. Page.
Well, thank you for having me. I think we're going to get that PowerPoint. I don't live in San Pedro, but I live just across the pond in an island. But I was married in San Pedro last year at Averill Park. So I, too, have that significance here at the meeting. Are we going to get it, David? Oh, there it is.
All right.
Perfect. God, the age of wireless technology. So, if you don't know, that's a Silverline bus, by the way. And they're branded. The Silverline started in December of 2009. We actually brought a number of express lines that were operating on the Harbor Freeway and the San Bernardino Freeway, the El Monte Busway, into one line and treated it like a rail line. So it operates like a rail line. So it's become extremely popular. We now have almost 16,000 riders a day. More of those riders come from the South Bay than they do from El Monte. Who would have ever thought that we would see the old Ascot Raceway parking lot filled to the brim now every morning? So how did the Silver Line get to San Pedro? Because it's coming on December the 13th of this year. Well, as the council member talked about, a board motion was given to staff to extend the Silver Line to San Pedro. So we developed a number of alternatives and presented those to the South Bay Service Council. We do have 5 service councils at Metro, and the South Bay Service Council takes care of San Pedro and Torrance and up to LAX. A public hearing was held in San Pedro on September the 16th with over 50 attendees. Staff returned to the South Bay Service Council in October for review of the public hearing responses, and a final route and schedule design will be implemented Sunday, December the 13th. So let's get to the fun part. This was a very fun project for me. What is the extension going to offer to San Pedro? Well, we're going to have a new express line that's going to operate from San Pedro called the 950X, kind of similar to the 450X. But the beauty of it is it's going to operate every 20 minutes from San Pedro and every 10 minutes from the Harbor Gateway Transit Center. So as I mentioned, this replaces the old line 450, which today runs every 30 to 60 minutes. So we're basically doubling the service or the frequency from San Pedro on the Express. Now the Express is going to run in the morning and the afternoon peaks, and in the midday we'll have line 910, which starts in El Monte and comes through downtown, will come all the way to San Pedro and picks up where the Express left off. So now if you were to take your bus to work from San Pedro, you now have a way to get back if you have to come back midday. That's the beauty of this new extension, is that you have a way to get home if an emergency comes up. The Silver Line extension to San Pedro will be every 30 minutes. Keep in mind the 450 today in the middays every 60 minutes. So again, we're doubling the service from San Pedro to downtown LA without a transfer. Today you have to transfer at Harbor Gateway Transit Center. So it's a one-seat ride. Same fare, $2.50. Saturday, Sunday, and holidays will be every 40 minutes. Today it's every 60 minutes. And the Saturday and Sunday holiday schedules will be identical, meaning that the bus will always come at the same time on Saturday, Sunday, and on holidays, taking the guesswork out of our scheduling. So how does this benefit San Pedro? Wow, that got whacked out. A one-seat ride from San Pedro to downtown, as I mentioned, but hey, you can go all the way to Cal State Hospital, USC County Hospital, or you can go all the way to Cal State LA, where there's now 2 private schools there. They're like special schools, special high schools they have up there, which have become very popular for Silver Line riders. Eliminates the transfer at Harbor Gateway, more frequent service to downtown LA. New express service extension through downtown LA will provide access to jobs such as at Civic Center, Bunker Hill, courthouses, and at Union Station. And why that's important is because the 450, which ran from San Pedro, stopped at 7th Metro. Everyone had to transfer to the Red Line or to a Dash bus or something. Now it's a one-seat ride all the way up to the Civic Center for residents of San Pedro. Service will remain on Pacific Avenue to 21st Street as it does today. Additional afternoon express service will start earlier from downtown back to San Pedro and will run later from downtown to San Pedro. We'll be using 45-foot buses, which means that's 5 more seats for each trip. The base fare is $250, and free transfers if using a tap card up to 2 hours after your initial tap. As part of this process, we had to go through a Title VI and equal justice review, and there were no disparate impacts, and there's no burden to people of poverty, and therefore it passed all the requirements of the Title VI part of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So next steps. Staff will notify customers with onboard brochures describing the service changes. We're working with marketing to have a special marketing campaign. Staff will be on hand at the Harbor Gateway Transit Center prior to the beginning of the new service to bring everybody up to speed. New timetables and schedule information will be available online and on buses prior to the implementation.
Thank you so much. For those of you remember, I did an experiment. I wanted to head to downtown City Hall without using my car. It took me 2.5 hours. I rode my bike to 22nd and Pacific, took a bus, took me about 45 minutes to get out of San Pedro from the bus line, and captured this on video, as most of you have seen. And there I experienced the ridership community, which was amazing. And Deborah, who I forget her last name, who's on the Central San Pedro Neighborhood Council, Deborah Hunter, even in the video, turned to me and said, we need that Silver Line to come down there so we can get in and out and come up and down. Otherwise, if I have to leave early, I have to wait hours to get the next bus down. But this, we're trying to do everything we can to bring and make it easier for folks to come down to our waterfront, especially during our weekend events. Was there an opportunity to partner with, we're going to have our Crafted Brewery open soon, but I'd like to see a partnership with Crafted and also the Battleship Iowa. What's next in line as far as forming a relationship with even our San Pedro Chamber folks?
Actually, your staff is small head a step of you. They're already working on partnering Metro with the USS Iowa. And anything else that comes up, our marketing department and communications department is willing to partner with the special events. We have a special events calendar online, and we also do brochures. And when discounts are given, we publicize those discounts, and that's what we're working with the USS Iowa. So as the special events start coming forward, certainly if the chamber were to work with Metro's communications and marketing and your staff, then we could get that on board, definitely.
Thank you for your work.
Oh, thank you.
I suspect that was a leading question. You knew that all about all those partnerships, and it's really great to highlight them. Mr. Bonin, you had a question.
Just a couple comments, actually. First of all, thank you for your work on this. As a Metro board member, this was something that was important to the mayor and to me and to all the city representatives who work closely with Mr. Buscaino. For anybody who has not had a chance to use the Silver Line, I encourage them to do so. Get a tap card. It's relatively easy. Could be easier. We're working on that. And take a ride on it. There's an historical bias in Los Angeles against mass transit. That's changing, thank God. That bias tends to be stronger against buses than it is against rail. I use an express bus as frequently as I can to get from my home in Mar Vista to City Hall. I encourage folks to try it out. Most folks who try it wind up liking it. I also want to sort of give some tips and thinking to the community about how to get light rail here eventually, because I know there's a lot of folks who are like, okay, this is all right, but I'd really like light rail. One is, as a board member, there's a couple different things that we'll look at. One is, how strong is ridership on this? Does this ridership actually show that there's a real demand and a hunger for rail, which is considerably more expensive and more permanent? So the success of this line will help point us in that direction. And the other thing that will be important for us is whether or not there's resources and revenue available to do it. So I would encourage everybody, if there happens to be a ballot measure next November asking for an extension and expansion of the sales tax in order to do more rail and more mass transit in Los Angeles, that you should certainly want to vote for that if rail to San Pedro is something you want to see. And I think there's a good chance we'll have something on the ballot next fall.
If I may, and I'll ask Mr. Bonin, if you go to the west side in Mr. Bonin's district, in fact, we made an agreement. I'm going to start taking all of his development down to our waterfront. Right,
Much as you want.
Thank you so much, Mike. But can you share with us your experience with transit-oriented development, TOD, and how this extension of the Silver Line will play into our efforts in trying to bring more density down to the water line?
Well, if more development and density is your goal, expanded mass transit is certainly a way to get more of that. Los Angeles has had a weird history in building mass transit. When we started building a mass transit system, nobody wanted it. So there were some future-thinking leaders who decided we needed it anyway, but Los Angeles Metro put it in the easiest places possible, where there was no density. The most reasonable place in LA to put transit would have been the Wilshire Corridor, where we have extreme density. We're finally doing that now. But it was built in places where there weren't density. And what we've seen around most mass transit lines is that becomes attractive to development and density because it's easier for people to get around. So there's a good chance, particularly if the community is willing, to encourage and incentivize transit-oriented development around bus stops or mass transit stops. There's a hunger for that out there in the community. It's easier for a number of reasons for a developer to build along a transit line, and will be getting easier as a result of some changes in state law about how you calculate traffic impacts of development.
And incentivize developers as well for future grant dollars if we know that there's transit lines, bus lines in or around a development. Thank you, Mike.
They get density bonuses for transit-oriented development, so there's a lot of good incentives. Okay, next part of this report, I'd like to bring up David Libatique from the Port to speak about a possible friendship of the Port relationships with the Port of Paloma. We're still on item one. Item one, and we've broken it up into sections. David here. See David talk about the Paloma. Palermo. Okay, my notes are wrong here. Still on item 1.
No, this is not.
Okay. Oh, this is on there. All right, let's move then to Mike Galvin or Sam Hughes. Okay, for the real estate market feasibility of the waterfront. Mr. Hughes? Gotcha.
Thank you, council members. Just to give an update with respect to the feasibility and market study, the department issued an RFP, and we had 4 responses, and we've selected a particular consultant to assist us in this endeavor, namely Economic Planning Systems. They were awarded the contract, and right now we're in the process of narrowing the scope to make certain that we can get the deliverables. Within the next day or two is to go to the city attorney's office, and once we get it back, which should be within about a week or so, we're ready to execute the contract and issue a notice to proceed. The thought is it will take about 3 months or so to provide us with the study. The thought is that after 10 weeks we would have a draft, and 3 weeks after that we would have the final report.
Ms. Gainer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pat Nave, I think this was one of your items that you wanted to get an update on, and here we are today, moving on it. You know, colleagues and members of the audience, I'm not a big fan of studies. I think studies put us in delay of progress. However, I'm told, and I'm trying to embrace the fact that studies do help, and they're used as a tool for economic development opportunities. Tomorrow night, we will share the results of the feasibility of Rancho San Pedro, and it gives developers a tool to see what works, what will not work, look at different density types. But if we really, I feel that if we're going to change the landscape here and bring in millennials and families along our waterline, we need to incentivize and look at the properties that the city owns along the waterfront in downtown San Pedro. We have surface parking lots that are just merely used for parking and that are in the heart of our historic downtown core. If you look at the mouth of Avalon in Wilmington, where we're reimagining Avalon Boulevard, there's an opportunity there to look at more retail dining entertainment. So I'm happy to hear the progress being made here. And I'm you know, as soon as we get this information, we will be sure to share it with each and every one of you. This is long overdue. My predecessors didn't look at really incentivizing city-owned property. And to go back to Mr. Wicken, and we're not limited to a 50-year lease on city-owned property. We can go 99 years on these surface parking lots and other key lots that are owned by the city around the area. So this report's already a few months late, but we were originally hoping it would be completed this September. I just would like to ask for a report in February to see where we're at on this.
Oh, certainly.
Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you.
Additional questions? No? Thank you very much. Finally, I'd like to invite Mike Galvin to speak about the waterfront redevelopment and all the items pertaining to it.
Morning, council members. Mike Galvin. I'm the director of waterfront and commercial real estate here at the port. Thank you for having us today, and thank you for coming down to visit the Port of Los Angeles. We've been hard at work since our last meeting with the former TCT committee in regards to transforming how we deal with the waterfront from an administrative level, as well as how we are putting brick and mortar together on the waterfront. So I'm going to go through a presentation that highlights the focus of what we wanted to hear about regarding the ports of call, and also get into some other details about other waterfront activities. We're going to start off with a promotional video that we've been using as a trailer in movie theaters to really put out the ideas about what the LA waterfront is about, so that more of the local community and the region can understand what we are working on here.
little technical difficulty.
Worked well earlier. I'm going to try it again.
There we go.
So videos like that, that one and others are going out across the region to show the places, events, and culture that the LA Waterfront offers to local communities as well as the larger region and the state itself. The focus here that we want to talk about is the Ports of Call redevelopment. This is the centerpiece of the LA Waterfront development, something that we have been working on for some time and really trying to move that forward here in the next year substantively. This is a very unique site. It's 30 acres with 3,000 linear feet of water frontage in the largest container port in the Western Hemisphere, which makes it unique from any other development site in the region or in the state for that matter. That's why it is central to our building value on the waterfront and important for us to move the rest of our waterfront forward. The site's unique location make this development site one-of-a-kind opportunity that's going to reintroduce our city to the working waterfront here in San Pedro. Regarding schedule, the waterfront at the Ports of Call site is made up of two components. It's the port's infrastructure, which will ready the site for development, which is really made up of three major projects: the Sampson Way intersection project, which will take Sampson Way smoothly down into the Ports of Call area, as you see up to the upper left. The Town Square project, which will join the waterfront in many areas from the downtown harbor, the promenade coming down from the Cruise Center, 6th Street coming from downtown and into the Ports of Call, and then the Ports of Call promenade, which will take visitors 3,000 feet down to the point of Ports of Call and through a new development at the Ports of Call site. The schedule we're looking at in front of us, very simplified here, is looking at those two components on the top, which is a combination of the promenade and the Town Square, as well as the Sampson Way project. Sampson Way starting construction in 2016 in the fall, with the promenade starting not too long after that in mid-2017. On top of all this, the developer, the LA Waterfront Alliance, will be coming in behind and intermittently with the port's infrastructure development and building out significant improvements that will repurpose the site. About 170,000 square feet of retail dining and entertainment is envisioned at this time in a very unique manner that will really envision what the rest of the port looks like around it. Their development schedule is looking at construction starting early part of 2017 and going about to the end of 2018.
So for the record, it'll be completed by the end of 2018. That'll be programmed,
That's the plan.
restaurants, retail.
You can see that there's some intertwine there between the port's schedule, which that's a matter of phasing around different areas. The crux of the developer's project will focus on the Town Square area and about the rest of the half of the rest of the triangle that we saw in that earlier picture, with the rest of it staying to some degree open. And so depending on phasing there, the port's later work may be on that southern end, but their plan is to finish by 2018. The redevelopment area and in Ports of Call and in the port in general is a very unique environment, not just because of its setting on America's port, the unique gateway of the active waterfront, which large container shipping lines going to and from their locations in the port, and also the overall setting is unique, that is different from any other development that we see today. We have a district in the Ports of Call area shadowed by the main channel. To the southwest, you have the SP Slip, which is the historic area for the fishing fleet in San Pedro, which is of importance culturally and historically for the community and the port as well. Behind that, you have a warehouse district that is built around World War II era and is currently being repurposed in a number of ways, including the Crafted at Port of Los Angeles, an early implementer here at the port, and repurposing and revitalizing existing warehouse space that is no longer used for those types of cargo purposes. So that is what makes the Port of Los Angeles a unique development opportunity because of the setting on the main channel, because of the historic nature of the rest of the development around that. And we really believe it makes the entire development an opportunity that nobody else has, whether in the state or in the Los Angeles region. These are some views of the LA waterfront from different vantage points. On the left, you have a view looking down the main channel, past the downtown harbor. You can see a cruise ship coming in and looking into the Ports of Call. Same picture looking directly from the downtown harbor into the main channel. Here's a higher view on your left-hand side. You can see the town square there, the green area to your on the left-hand picture. To the right there, you see newly developed Sampson Way going into the Ports of Call development and the main channel activity serving as the theater of the sea behind the Ports of Call development and 3,000 linear feet of waterfront access that will be opened up through Ports of Call. It will be a significantly different site in the future with pure access going 3,000 feet down the waterfront for people, pedestrians, bicycles, all kinds of activity to move up and down and to witness the largest port in the country.
Mike, so folks around town want to see, what it's truly going to look like. Would you assume that, I hate assumptions, but if you were to go down the Marina Cabrillo Way, the promenade there would be similar to the one that we're going to see at Ports of Call?
There will be some similarities. There's a basic waterfront design guideline that is attempted to be followed all around the waterfront, but with uniqueness in each site. So it will look to some degree like that. Railing treatments, lighting treatments, which will attempt to be similar throughout, but you'll see different pieces that will reflect what the developer is doing on the site as well. And this site is much larger. We'll be tying into this large town square and then funneling people down to the waterfront. So there will be differences, but there will be similarities. The LA Waterfront Capital Plan, from a 10-year perspective, is really based on the Public Access Investment Plan, which was a precedent-setting plan the port came out with last year to establish predictability for private developers going forward, to establish predictability for the port finances going forward, and to make a responsible step forward in really tying the port's success in our future ability to invest in the waterfront. Generally, what the plan does is it ties 10% of our net profits into waterfront access investment on a yearly basis. The initial version of that looked at 6 different projects that were prioritized through community groups, including the Chambers of Commerce in both Wilmington, San Pedro, and Harbor Gateway, as well as neighborhood councils. They came up with the 6 main projects. Here we see in Wilmington the Avalon Boulevard Corridor project, which will tie the current Wilmington Waterfront Park into the Avalon Corridor, both through an abandoned rail right-of-way that you see up in the left-hand corner and to a green belt that ties into the pedestrian walkway, which will eventually be built to tie everything in down to the Avalon Boulevard Corridor Phase 1A South, which is really the Wilmington Waterfront, which will be developed from Banning's Landing to the west. And you will have an expansive area down there to allow for commercial development as well as to tie back into the larger Avalon Corridor.
Design was, we approved a contractor to design the Wilmington waterline, right? Waterfront?
Correct. Design is ongoing now. Sasaki has been chosen as the designer for that
And the time
project.
frame for the Wilmington waterfront design?
I can move forward
Oh,
here.
there it is. Thank you.
So these are the San Pedro projects we already saw. The more or less schedule for those 6 identified projects is up on top of the screen. The San Pedro projects really now intending to happen in the first 4 years of the plan, and we are trying to compress the Wilmington side as well, looking at the waterfront park to be the first thing that happens there. I'm sorry, not the waterfront park, but the waterfront development adjacent to Banning's Landing to be the first thing that happens there. So you have design ongoing right now. You'll have design ongoing for, I think, 18 months or so, and then you'll be getting into construction sometime after.
And I've asked you this offline, and I'll ask you this in public. Why does the design phase take a year and a half? I know there's a lot of details, but
There's a lot of detail to it. You have to come up with the concept, and then you have to move that into a much more specified design and plans. And I'm not an engineer, but there is a lot of work that goes into expansive projects
including
like that.
infrastructure, underground infrastructure.
Everything, the seawall, how all the utilities tie in, with the types of components you're going to be using to develop different pieces of it. There's a variety of disciplines that have to go into that and have to interface with each other, make decisions, and move the process forward. So the Wilmington Waterfront especially and the Ports of Call Promenade are expansive projects, over half a mile long for the Ports of Call Promenade, very large for the Wilmington project. So there's a lot of pieces that need to tie in, and that's why it takes an extended period of time. Below the 6 projects on the top, you see additional future projects. You can see that the 6 projects on the top are expected to cost in the range of $140 million, leaving $60 million more or less based on our actual income receipts going forward for other projects that have not yet been prioritized. So we're looking at other projects potentially. Sampson Way is one of those projects, extending it down from Port Sakal all the way to Altasea. The Avalon Triangle Park in Wilmington as well is another one of those potential projects. That will be a continued dialogue with the communities and the business groups that we've been talking to about prioritization going forward. Regarding waterfront linkages for development, this was a key issue in looking at waterfront development in both San Pedro and Wilmington areas. We talked about some of those linkages and how we're going to link the Wilmington Waterfront Park with the Avalon Corridor, with the Wilmington Waterfront. These are the linkages around the San Pedro area. Very important to allow for pedestrians, vehicles, and alternative modes of transportation to move in and out of waterfront areas and to bring people down from San Pedro, to bring people down from downtown into these center meeting points like the town square, like the waterfront plaza as well. So there's a variety of different ways that we're going to do that. You see a bunch of different colored lines here on this map, and the intent is to show different modes of transportation, whether they be rubber tire trolley, light rail, pedestrian, vehicular. These are different ways that we will move people around. And this is a living piece. We will understand more as we build up the waterfront, how different pieces will attract to each other and how people will want to move in between them. These are some of the main components of the waterfront that will be key to tie together. Right now we have a variety of attractions that some are tied together, some are not. The key going forward to make it a day at the waterfront is to tie all these components together and to tie people that are coming here transiently, maybe through cruise terminal, to other portions of the waterfront. So you start with the cruise terminal where the promenade began back in early 2000, moving people from there down into the Central District, into the USS Iowa area that has seen renewed success in the last couple of years, bringing people further down into the downtown harbor where people can congregate in the expansive outside area and where the water has been brought closer to the promenade. The events that we have programmed in these waterfront areas, especially the downtown harbor, have been very significant in bringing the community together into these meeting places. Going forward, transitioning into Crafted and bringing people from the Port Sakal to the promenade, to the Crafted area, to the new Cabrillo Way Marina area, which we expect to put out for RFP in the beginning of next year. Right now we have entitled 90,000 square feet of retail, dining, and entertainment space there.
Guys, that's this right here, ladies and gentlemen, this development, there's so much potential here. I know we're focused a lot on Port Sakal. We're going to get Port Sakal done. But if you look at just how it's laid out overlooking the marina, the outer harbor, 12.5 acres. I'm just really excited to hear that the port's going to move quickly on putting this out to RFP. I know we want to get Port Sakal solidified with the lease agreement. We're going to get there, but I'm fired up over this opportunity here. It's going to be amazing.
So are we, but it's important to do things with strategy and to build value over time, and we believe Port Sakal is the first step. This is the second step. We think Warehouse 1 is also a third step that will be coming relatively quickly thereafter. The nice thing about this site is all of the infrastructure is built already. The waterfront promenade is built already. The parking is built already. The street access is built already. So this is a site that is ready for development today. The Altasea site, a critical component of our waterfront development, private investors coming in to really transform 240,000 square feet of warehouse space that is no longer used for purpose into educational, research, and business hubs to really bring the sea to our port and to bring better connection between our environment and us, and to do that in a way that is really going to transform the waterfront by bringing different types of people down to the waterfront, educational types, institutional organizations that are interested in research and development. This is really going to put a different face. It's not the commercial side of it. It's not retail, dining, and entertainment. It's something different that could transform the waterfront in a way that the other types of developments will not. It's not just a visitor serving issue. It's really a situation where people will come and live here because of Altasea.
If I can add, Mr. Blumenfield, we're trying to find every way we can to diversify our workforce, and we believe that Altasea will do just that. It's going to be a tech hub, and these professors, these students, these startup companies, they're going to need a place to live. And if you look at models across the country, people today, they want to live, work, and play in one area. There's going to be a time where people aren't going to need a car. So Altasea is going to be really a huge factor in diversifying our workforce, one, and also going to help with our efforts to add homes and condos and bring some density down our water line.
So the linkage implementation process will continue along the promenade, down through Ports of Call, Sampson Way, and the future Sampson Way projects will tie Ports of Call back down into Alta Sea, into Crafted, into the Cabrillo Way Marina, eventually out to Warehouse 1, which will provide miles and miles of walking area for people to come down and experience the expansive waterfront. This is the lower half of Sampson Way that will tie into those areas in Alta Sea that we discussed previously. These are some of the linkages opportunities that we have. We're also looking at alternative emissions-free vehicles on the rubber-tired trolley right now. Our environmental group is looking to a grant to fund one or two of those to bring here to the port to augment the current fleet that the PBID has, which will provide more scheduled ridership and an ability for us to be flexible as we see people wanting to move around the waterfront. Looking at a bike share concept as well is something that we've always considered as viable down here on the waterfront as we expand the promenade. Wrapping up, the LA waterfront really needs to go from the stage of infrastructure and events, which we've been at since really 2000. We built a lot of infrastructure. We programmed it with events. We built value. We brought interest to a bunch of people that haven't seen the waterfront in some time. And now it's in the phase of attracting private investment. And to do that, we need to reshape the way that administratively we deal with the commercial waterfront assets that we have here at the Port of Los Angeles. We have two very diverse businesses. We have a business on the industrial side where the port serves as a developer for the most part. And we have a business on this side where we really need private investment to come in and be the developer. And that private investment comes with different tools, requires different tools, and it really focuses on financial institutions that need to lend money and need to be secure in lending money on long-term investments to some of the issues that Mr. Wickham addressed earlier with regards to longer-term leases, with regards to investment strategies that incentivizes people to continually reinvest. We don't want to be in a situation like Ports of Call ever again where a lease goes down to zero. That is not the intent. If you have done that, you have let things go down to the bottom of your asset value. We need to come up with strategies to address that, and we have through administrative means at the Port of Los Angeles. Under the leadership of Gene Soroka, we have changed the way that real estate is managed here at the port beginning in April of this year. Changed the real estate group from a real estate group focusing on all real estate to a real estate group split in between the industrial side and the waterfront and commercial real estate side. We will be developing a waterfront leasing policy over the next year that will really focus on these commercial cycles of reinvestment so we don't have a prolonged downturn like we have at Ports of Call for the last 25 years. Although we do have big success stories out there, the San Pedro Fish Market is one of them, one of the most successful restaurants in the country, one of the biggest restaurants in California. We can do a lot better than that. And over time, we think with policies and procedures and tools to private investors, we can get there. The waterfront development strategy, which I spoke about, the different pieces as we build value and go forward with the largest piece in the outer harbor, the 12.5 acres, we believe we can build a lot of value going out there once the other pieces become developed. And more interaction informationally with our communities through the LAwaterfront.org website to get out to people what we're doing on the waterfront, where we are with construction, where we are on projects, where we are with policy, so people understand the port is doing a lot to move this process forward, and we're working day and night to make it happen. Lastly, outreach to private developers and investors to know that we're open for business, we understand their issues, and we're working towards resolving them.
Well, let me say, since the EIR was passed, Mr. Blumenfield, in 2009, we have seen so much progress in dedicating a commitment to change the landscape down here and commit to revitalizing our water line. I came in 2012, 3 years after the 2009 EIR was passed, and we saw delay after delay and the lack of commitment from the port and the city. We are weeks away from securing a long-term lease agreement with the developer of Ports of Call. Now, I get it. There are a lot of skeptics out there, including my own mother, who, hammers me almost on a weekly basis. What's going on with Ports of Call? What's going on with Ports of Call? And we're not going to believe it till we see it. I understand that. Saving our waterfront, of course. We're all, singing the same song. We're all demanding action, and we're all demanding a development that will put us on the map, because we're tired of going to Torrance and Long Beach and spending our money elsewhere. We want a development that we can go to 7 days a week and not a development that only serves a weekend crowd. I was real excited about the progress being made. And, you know, if you read the paper today in the Daily Breeze, I think the city of Redondo Beach is we meeting shortly on starting the EIR for the Redondo Beach Pier. And, I mean, God help us, if they beat us to this, I'm giving up here.
Don't give up. You're too tenacious.
But we know an EIR does not happen overnight, so I know we're way ahead of the curve compared to Redondo Beach, and that's good for Redondo Beach, but it takes me, you know, it takes everyone hours to get to Redondo Beach. We're right off the freeway here. But nonetheless, I really appreciate Mr. Galvin, the report and the dedication from the port, and also to each and every one of you. Keep screaming, keep pounding, keep putting up those lawn signs that say "Save Our Waterfront," because you know what? We all want the same thing. We all want the same thing. So if you're preaching to anyone, you're preaching to me, you're preaching to the choir, because we're on the move here, and we're really excited about getting this long-term lease agreement signed and moving forward on bringing some density in here and diversifying our workforce and putting us on the map. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Great report. Thank you very much. Exciting item and a large item. Next, I've been asked by my colleague to jump to item number 9, which I'm happy to do. So we'll jump to item 9, and then we'll come back to the other items. Mr.
Councilmember, the item number 1, the action for that will be?
It's the action for that is note and file. Correct.
Can you can we make that how do we make this into a council record? Okay, so we want the city clerk to attach Mr. Galvin's PowerPoint to the file.
Yes.
Thank you, to make that an official record. Yes. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
so without objection, we'll attach it to the
Thank you.
file, and we'll note and file the item. But that'll create the council record I think that you're looking for. And we'll move to item number 9. Mr. Espinosa, would you read item number 9?
And that was item number 9, correct?
Correct.
Item number 9 is a Board of Harbor Commissioners report relative to the First Amendment to a permit with Crafted at the Port of Los Angeles.
And there are some cards on this item before we, so I have 3 cards on item number 9, so we'll bring these folks up. Rachel Sindelar, followed by Martin Blank, followed by David Hollop. So Ms. Sindelar, and I may be mispronouncing your name, you can correct me and I apologize.
No, you're absolutely right.
All right.
Thank you very much for your attention to this matter this afternoon. I'm Rachel Sindelar. I'm the director of Crafted at the Port of Los Angeles. We're in warehouses 9 and 10 down in the Outer Harbor. And we run a small arts and crafts market on the weekends. And by virtue of the amendment before you, we'll be opening one of the largest craft breweries in Southern California in just a few days. So we're very excited about it, and we absolutely could not have done it without the help of Councilman Buscaino and his staff. They've been incredible, as has the staff at the port, Don Liu, Mike Galvin, Rika Viola especially. So I thank you very much for your support, and we look forward to seeing you soon at our new brewery.
Thank you. Next we have Mr. Blank.
I'd like to pass on that one.
Okay, Mr. Blank passes. And next is David Hollop.
Hi, I'm Dave Hollop. I'm from Brewery West. We're the brewery that Rachel referenced. And I just wanted to say thank you to Councilman Buscaino, his staff, the port, the Chamber of Commerce, all the neighborhood councils, the City of LA Economic Workforce Development Department, Crafted, and everybody else who has supported us in getting this far. And as Rachel said, we are finally in the home stretch here, and I don't know if we're days away from opening, but certainly weeks. We're actually brewing our first beer in a few days.
Exciting.
The manufacturer is here. We're commissioning, and Saturday maybe is the target. And we hope to be open by the end of the year. Got to finalize all the final sign-offs and all of that, but we'll keep everyone posted on the exact date. And we look forward to seeing everybody, and yeah, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Okay, now we'll have the report from Mr. Galvin.
Item before you is First Amendment to Crafted's permit here in the Port of Los Angeles. Crafted opened a craft marketplace in the Port of Los Angeles and has, in the past couple of years, repurposed that marketplace to look at other uses, to move with the evolving market, and one of those uses is the brewery, which we have in front of us today. The First Amendment allows for an expanded suite of uses for Crafted to expand their development opportunity, as well as to change some administrative issues in the lease between Craft and the Port of Los Angeles. On top of that, the sublease to the brewery is also being asked for approval through this process because the sublease exceeds the amount of area that can be leased under the current, or that can be subleased under the current permit. So the First Amendment will do both the change of use, and then the same action will be asking for the sublease to be consented to as well.
Great. So one thing when we visited there, Joe and I visited, there was a giant raccoon in the rafters. You may want to look into that.
We are going to...
Still gentrifying the area.
Yeah, we'll welcome everyone, including our furry friends. Is that Commissioner Perosi? I want to thank Commissioner Perosi. I know I did mention Commissioner Arian, who's here, for supporting this proposed First Amendment to the Crafted's permit. You know, I would have preferred that that it was a unanimous support, but it wasn't. But we got through it on the port side. And the reason why I wanted to recognize this item and put it out front and get it quick, because I know Dave has to get back to get ready for brewing. But I also want to recognize he's not here, but our investor, the investor of Crafted, the one who's believed in San Pedro, Mr. Wayne Blank, and who's put in millions of his own dollars in Warehouse 9 and 10. And just want to recognize his effort in trying to put us on the map. And I know with Crafted, and we have a big wedding coming up this weekend there. There's going to be an amazing, they've brought in a premier event space there at Crafted, and then this brewery that's going to come help supplement. It's going to be one of the greenest breweries as well in the country. So really appreciate the port's commitment, Mr. Blank's commitment, Rachel and David and Brian, who's just been working each and every. I went by on Sunday night. I had family in town. I took them down to Crafted, and I saw Brian Mercer putting up lights. So really appreciate the effort, and to all the regulatory agencies that were involved here, thank you for moving on this.
Great, thank you. And I suspect, though, you will get a unanimous vote here, if I'm not mistaken. Right. So without objection, let's give you that unanimous vote to move this forward. So we're going to approve the CAO and POLA recommendations. Without objection, that's ordered. And we're going to jump back in the chronology to item number 2. Mr. Espinosa, if you'd read item number 2.
Item number 2 is a motion from Council Members Buscaino and Bonin relative to a marketing strategy to promote tourism at the LA Waterfront.
Great, and we do have a number of cards on this table, on this item. So we'll start again with Rachel Sinclair, followed by Kathleen Woodfeld.
Good afternoon again. I keep thinking I'm going to have more time to prepare for these things. So. I just wanted to thank you again for recognizing the contribution that we've made to the waterfront. That was very nice of you just to point out. We were one of the early adopters that bought into this idea of the LA waterfront, and it's been slow for us, but over time we have seen that it's been working out. We're growing. When we open this brewery, we'll double the amount of size that we have in lease space. We recently passed our 250,000 visitor mark, and we're on a 3-day-a-week schedule, so it's pretty great for us. And I'm really proud of the way we've been able to open up our buildings to all kinds of people. These buildings probably should have been condemned before we took them over, and now we're able to open them to visitors and tourists in all kinds of ways. So, for small businesses like mine, it can be very difficult to market to the size we need to reach to be successful. It's a cluttered world out there, and we're not the kind of place that you happen to stumble upon. So myself and the aquarium and the Iowa, we work together in every way we can to get the word out about what's going on down here. But a comprehensive strategy like this would help us out a lot. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll have Kathleen Woodfeld, followed by Rich Abel.
Excuse my sunglasses, I ran out. I wasn't expecting to come here, and they do have bifocals attached to them. First of all, thank you for being here. And I think it's great that we're doing a marketing strategy. I just want to say a few things, however. I do believe that San Pedro can be a great staycation destination. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. However, I believe the port's investments in goods movement versus tourism is grossly imbalanced. And I believe there are a lot of lucrative opportunities for tourism and recreation that are being denied in lieu of a more industrial profile. And I also believe that we miss opportunities because of our industrial profile. The Port of Los Angeles really needs a more diversified portfolio. And I think that the port itself and the port communities, which are all part of Los Angeles, would greatly benefit from looking at a more diversified portfolio and a willingness to invest in beautification and tourism and recreational destination type projects. For instance, if you're going to bring people to the area, they're going to be judging what it looks like. Do they want to come back? I think the port can do some real, somewhat simple improvements by beautifying their fence line. There's parts of Harbor Boulevard, for instance, when you're going near China shipping, and that can be easily beautified, in my opinion, with some bougainvillea, water it, and really helps to create a soft place for the eyes to land rather than having this harsh industrial area where you see containers stacked. So as much as however, I am supportive of doing this type of a program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Woodfeld. So next, Rich Abel, followed by Mike Hirschman. If you hear your name next, just to kind of get yourself ready so you're close by near the 2-minute mark so we can move forward. Mr. Abel.
Yes, good afternoon, council members. My name is Rich Abele, and I am a volunteer on the Battleship Iowa. I'm a recent new resident of San Pedro, however, a retired naval officer that served here starting almost 40 years ago, and I'm quite familiar with the waterfront, the Long Beach area, and more recently the San Pedro area. I'm here as an advocate for the development of a marketing strategy to promote tourism along the waterfront. I personally have been involved in Battleship Iowa activities from the get-go 3.5 years ago, and during that time I've been watching improvements that have been occurring along the waterfront, and together under the leadership of Councilman Buscaino have been noticing improvements in planning to increase tourism in this area. Just wanted to quickly summarize that we really have quite an attractive waterfront already with, as you've already heard, a lot of planning going forward. However, we still have opportunities here to really promote and do a better job. Fleet Week, for example, or Navy Days, I understand is something that is on the agenda for expansion and improvement, and then, of course, all the other development activities along the waterfront. So I urge you to throw all your resources at the continued development of our port, as well as improve on our strategy moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Next, Mike Hirschman, followed by Richard Lanograph.
Hi, I'm Mike Hirschman. I'm a 50-year resident of the harbor area. I was down at Point Furman this morning myself, taking a little walk. I'm also have been a tour guide on the Iowa for the last 3.5 years. And what I thought I'd do here, yesterday I was working the 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock shift on the quarterdeck. That's where we greet people when they come on board. And I thought for the purposes of this meeting, I might ask a simple question. of the people that came on board. Where are you from? Okay? So here are the answers. Tehachapi, Gardena, Whittier, Iowa, Wasilla, Alaska, and they knew Sarah too. Minneapolis, Minnesota, Germany, Wisconsin, Billings, Montana, San Jose, Elk Grove, California, Stockton, Amsterdam, Ho Chi Minh City, and Genoa, Italy. Now, we're dancing as fast as we can down in the Iowa. We're anxious for all of these developments to get there as quick as we can. But what we need right now is help getting more tourists here before all that stuff is done. Okay? Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much. Next, Richard Lanograph, followed by, looks like Done Moen. Or Mr. Lanograph.
Thank you, gentlemen, and good afternoon to you. I'm Richard Lanograph. I'm the naval architect for the battleship Iowa. As I was in the 1980s, Long Beach Naval Shipyard, which is the planning yard for the battleships, I was one of the instrumental people out of the design division to reactivate all 4 of the battleships. Luckily, I was able to go to sea on 2 of them for gunnery trials. But the battleship Iowa is not a standard amusement park. We don't have any thrill rides for you, unless you're from Nebraska and trying to negotiate the 110 freeway. And but as my previous speaker was saying, people from all over the world. Just this last July, an email friend of mine from the Ukraine came over here just to visit the battleship Iowa. See, we get a different type of tourist. We get people who are interested in the history that this city has put in for the defense of this country, the Navy. I've donated some items to the Maritime Museum down here. We have an excellent place for military history. People come down here to look at not just what the ship looks like. Well, some do. If they're civil engineering students, they want to see what kind of engineering went in to design that ship in the 1930s when the closest thing you had to a computer was a slide rule. But people come down there to see what their fathers did, what their grandfathers did, what their great-grandfathers did. We are not just a pretty attraction. We plan to be an educational center. Even the Los Angeles City Fire Department, I was talking to one during Veterans Day. I told them about damage control in 2 and 3, ways to fight a fire aboard a ship. So, there's a schedule on it? Yeah. You got to fight a fire compartment by compartment.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. And that was, as I said, was an educational center, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Okay, next, Mr. Moen, followed by Amber Boyle.
Thank you. It's nice to be here during this one great hour of sharing, using your words, preaching to the choir. It's not exactly God's work that you're doing, but it's very close. I spent about 30 years working downtown and involved in a lot of major efforts to make LA a world-class city. Tourism is a fundamental part of that. I have had the opportunity to travel all over the world, and this is not exactly motivational, but it's certainly in support of what you're doing. If you go to major cities throughout the world, you will see that they've invested major amounts of money and effort in building waterfront developments. And it's kind of the same thing. If you build it, they will come. The other thing, Councilman Bonin, I was a volunteer at the airport too. And I got tired of people coming in and asking, how do you get to Las Vegas, Santa Monica, Venice Beach? That's the way people actually visualize the waterfront opportunities in Los Angeles. I'd urge us to make sure that we counter that. The other thing I would make as a suggestion, you got to figure out how to get people from LAX down here. Right now, that's a major, major impediment. So thank you again for your work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Amber Boyle, followed by Jonathan Williams.
Hello, I'm Amber Boyle with Harbor Breeze Cruises, the Vice President, and we're the mother company for LA Waterfront Cruises down at Ports of Call area since this past April. We're very appreciative to have the opportunity to be represented in there and bring people from all over the world to go whale watching, go on harbor cruises, and then do boat charters. So just a couple weeks ago, we had 250 people. It was a group that was a convention group that we brought into the LA Harbor to show them and take them out whale watching. They were staying at the Terranea Resort, which is one of our partners there. And this past week, we were trying to get 1,500 Chinese visitors to the area. We did lose, the LA Waterfront Cruises lost that business to our parent company, Harbor Breeze Cruises, because of the Long Beach previous efforts to do the redevelopment in their areas. So we're definitely hoping to, with the marketing and strategy going forward and with the future plans to be able to get more people in conjunction with the USS Iowa, Crafted, and other people by showing what we have to represent as a group of tourist destinations. So thank you for your time and your support, and we appreciate everything going forward.
Thank you, Ms. Boyle. Next, last speaker on this item is Jonathan Williams.
Greetings. Woo, I can get a little loud on this. Hopefully I don't get so nervous. Last time I did this podium makes me nervous for some reason. But anyways, I'm Jonathan Williams, President and CEO of the Battleship Iowa. I know both of you great gentlemen have been great leaders for us. And I'm in full support of a marketing strategy for the LA Waterfront. We are one of the few that see daily the front row seat of what really happens down there. You've heard from some of the folks on board. It's no longer a question of whether the LA Waterfront will be a tourist attraction. It is now how can we accelerate it. We see this daily. We draw more than 200,000 visitors annually as a top 20 Los Angeles attraction, and we're most likely the most unique museum in Los Angeles. We're frequently included on the itinerary of tourists and tour operators, like you heard from some of the areas, China, Japan, Germany, Australia, Russia. It all depends on the time of season that we see them. But in fact, right now we have 2 salespeople that are out visiting tour operators this week and next week to bring more people to this waterfront. What does it mean for the local community? Well, we give over 10,000 students in Los Angeles through a program with LAUSD free admission to a STEM program every year because of what those tourists are doing to maintain the ship. We're able to offer free programming like Movie Under the Guns and our Veterans Festival and different festivals for all of the community to enjoy. Last Movie Under the Guns was over 600 people that attended that locally. These are families that can't afford to go to movies, but they can go for free on the ship. Tourists that eat, stay, shop in our local community. Although we're a top 20 attraction and a great community platform, we're still not on par with the Midway in San Diego, the Intrepid in New York, the Missouri in Pearl Harbor. We will be. Each of these museum ships see over 550,000 people per year, and it's primarily due to the respective waterfronts being established destinations. So I truly thank your guys' efforts in making this happen. This waterfront is happening. It will continue to happen. Let's make it happen faster.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Williams. And that's a good note to end on, and then to bring up Ms. McJennett to come to the table. And I know that the Tourism Convention Board has been working on waterfront specific marketing, and we'd love for you to tell us a little bit about it.
Thank you, and thank you for your time to hear what we're doing in terms of our marketing activities, both for the destination at large and specifically San Pedro and LA Waterfront. I've been working with the waterfront community for a long time, and I will tell you this is certainly the most synergy, the most passion, the most product that we have had down here to be marketing. So yes, it is true, you build it, you will open it, and we will market it. So, but I wanted to, just also as a little bit of background, As you know, we've made some great strides over the last 4 years in our ability to be able to market. And that's a lot due to the establishment of the Tourism Marketing District about 4 years ago, which has just been renewed for another 10 years. We are charged with marketing Los Angeles, both as a leisure destination and as a destination for meetings and conferences. So we have a multi-prong approach. Where we've made the biggest strides is being able to talk to the leisure traveler. That's the leisure visitor. We haven't been able to really brand or advertise like we have been able over the last 3 or 4 years. You can see the metrics up there. To be able to really tell the regional story, you've got to be using and generating earned media coverage now to the tune of $40 million. Our website has been enormously expanded. We get, on the average, 11.4 million visits annually. And we're very aggressive in the digital channels now to about 3 million followers. We also speak to those people that Jonathan was talking about, those tour operators, those meeting professionals, those travel agents that then tell your story over and over again. We work very closely with the hotels now in San Pedro. We have a sales effort. We have one person that's dedicated both to San Pedro as well as to the airport area. We have specific sectors that is relevant to the San Pedro region that we are going after. Adding to that list should also be sustainability and clean tech and a few more. And then year-round, we are doing the typical activities, trade shows, customers, and all of that is certainly benefiting the waterfront area. We've also been able to really expand, and I know Councilman Buscaino and Councilman Bonin know this personally because they've been with us on an international trade mission that we went with the mayor. But to really, we're now in 12 markets internationally. We just opened another office in Guangzhou. We have our websites now in 8 languages. And as you heard with Jonathan and the other gentleman who listed off a lot of the international travelers, that is really key for us as well in terms of growing those numbers. One of the...
Go to the previous slide.
Yeah.
As it relates to convention and hotel, would you agree that if we had more convention and hotel space here, it'd be more of a draw for people to remain here and after their meetings to visit our storefronts and our restaurants and contribute to our local economy?
I definitely think more hotels would be appropriate here. You just heard about Terranea, which is a resort, but they're pulling from some of the market share here in San Pedro. I think you need hotels with substantial conference space.
Conference space, right.
You know, the definition between conference and convention is different, I think, in our world to your world, but certainly that there is expansion within the hotels to bring down those conferences because you can use multi-hotels for one conference.
Right.
Absolutely. And self-contained hotel business or meeting business is really growing. So there is a big market, I think, that's under.
So you would say that we're competing more with Long Beach, who has a convention center as well as more rooms, more hospitality rooms for hotel rooms.
And I think, you know, whether it actually ends up to be a conference center or it's a hotel and a complex with sufficient conference space, I think is what would really be a benefit to the area. Did that answer? Okay. We talked to you before, about maybe a year ago, we started talking about how do we take a deeper dive into the regions of Los Angeles? How do we really tell that neighborhood story? So we began, again, this is through the Tourism Marketing District, talking with the hotels and about, I think somebody's kids are like, bring them to the meeting. I'm not that boring. We can, we've got a video we could show them coming up. But anyway, we were able to shoot over videos for over 90 hotels within Los Angeles, with all the hotels in the San Pedro area having that opportunity, and 33 neighborhoods we shot videos for. So I'm going to just show you the one that we did for San Pedro, but we also put together a mapping navigation on our website that we weren't able to tell this type of local story before.
Ocean enthusiasts, maritime buffs, and seafood lovers, that foghorn is calling your name. Welcome to San Pedro on the LA waterfront. This historic seaside community is just 20 miles from downtown LA. It's full of beautiful parks and beaches, an aquarium, eclectic shops and galleries, boating adventures, great restaurants, and exciting year-round events. All against the dramatic backdrop of the busiest port in the nation. Getting around is a breeze. Just hop on the San Pedro trolley to reach dozens of attractions and points of interest. At the fanfare water fountains outside the World Cruise Center, you can stand in the midst of a choreographed water show set to popular music. Take a tour of the Battleship Iowa, the West Coast's only U.S. Navy battleship attraction. Shop for handmade treasures and gourmet treats at Crafted at the Port of Los Angeles, a permanent indoor artisan marketplace. Visit Ports of Call Village on the port's main channel, where you can wave at the massive cruise ships heading out to sea, find local shops to explore, and enjoy great restaurants with heaping plates of fresh seafood to conquer. At family-friendly Cabrillo Beach, fish for mackerel from the San Pedro Pier. Stand up paddleboard or watch the windsurfers sail by. And up on the bluff, explore the Point Fermin Lighthouse. Or for amazing views of the LA Harbor and Catalina Channel, visit the massive Korean Friendship Bell in Angels Gate Park that has been featured in popular films such as Usual Suspects and 500 Days of Summer. San Pedro is waiting to be part of your LA story. Plan your trip now at discoverlosangeles.com.
And I also just want to acknowledge Arlie at the port and some of the stakeholders down here in helping to give us guidance in putting that together. So then after they're now produced, they're on our website, we then did a 6-week rollout. And we did this all through social media. We retained about 25 of the social influencers to join us. And we had just enormous numbers as a whole, something around 115 million visitors, or impressions. But what big point here that I think everybody should feel really good about is that San Pedro, the rankings, the metrics, rated in the top 30% of all of the videos. And you expect our other more iconic neighborhoods to certainly be taking the majority of that, but actually San Pedro ranked really well. So you can see from the numbers up there the total number of organic impressions, then we boosted that with some paid impressions for a total of 2.7 million impressions and over 20,000, or about 20,000 video views. We also have optimized for mobile application our website, so content is extremely important. We're always looking for new content, and again, working with the partners down here. This is what San Pedro is in a number of stories, but this is one that's just featuring the Korean Bell in Hidden Gems. We also have a very robust events calendar for Los Angeles and are continually trying to push out the events. Particularly here you see the lobster event, the Halloween event, most recently Veterans, and we're expecting to see some pretty exciting news of exciting events next year, and we'll be working with the team here to push those out aggressively. San Pedro attractions have been very, very enthusiastic about participating in our promotional seasonal events. As you see up here, they have also been very supportive of helping to host the FAM tours, the customer site visits, the media. In fact, at the bottom slide there, you see that was just a China-ready training that we did, and all 3 of the major attractions down here did participate in that. We're particularly excited about this opportunity. This is an opportunity we just don't get that often. But the Professional Travel Agents of North America Convention is going to be holding their annual convention on the Princess Cruise. So we raised our hand, talked to them, and said we would love to host them for the travel agents, host them in San Pedro for what they call a pre-convention visit.
So hold on, convention's going to be here?
The convention's actually
on the cruise ship.
On the cruise ship. Princess
But docked here?
No, it'll go out. It'll cruise. But what we've done is invite them to come for 2 days prior to them getting on.
Nice.
And then we will be, again, working with our local sponsors here to make sure that they really see San Pedro, the waterfront, as it should be seen.
So they board the cruise ship here?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
The actual...
What's the date on that?
Well, the convention starts December 5th, and then the pre-convention FAM is going to be December 3rd through the 5th.
Got it.
So we have reached out to the port, the chamber, and of course the bid, and they were all working together. The port is helping to provide transportation.
Fantastic.
We're also working with the other industry partners that you see up here, including our two larger hotels, Crafted. We want to make sure that while they're here, they're seeing all the attractions, taking a harbor cruise as well, experiencing both the hotels and the restaurants. So we're pretty excited about that. And I think one of the biggest things, and you've heard it here today, is you've got a passionate group of stakeholders. We want to continue to collaborate with them. I think we have forged some pretty strong relationships. This is just the mixer that the Chamber of San Pedro and LA Tourism just recently co-hosted. And all the good news that we've heard today about what you're doing, the infrastructure that you're building, truly, you build it and we will promote it. Any questions specifically?
If I can, Mr. Chair. So earlier this year, Patty and the LA Tourism came before council and gave a presentation of all the neighborhoods that they're focused on. And frankly, I stood and I wasn't happy with that we're being left out. What an amazing turnabout of events. Patty, thank you for partnering with our local chambers and our partners in putting San Pedro and the waterfront on the map. I want to thank also Harbor Breeze. One story that I hate to share, but it's truthful. There was a couple times where Jay and my kids, we were at Terranea for dinner, and the kids love going to Nelson's, right? And we hop on the golf cart, and I ask the driver of the golf cart, what happens when you leave this development? When you leave Terranea and you turn right, and twice the golf cart, the employee at Terranea says it takes you to Long Beach.
Jeez.
So it completely bypasses San Pedro. So I want to thank Harbor Breeze to partner with Terranea, Amber, that's bringing some of the visitors from Terranea to showcase our magical waterfront. In addition, I would ask that we also look at the Banning Mansion.
Yes.
That is an incredible asset in Wilmington, where I'd like to see a partnership between even the city of Avalon, San Pedro, and Wilmington. That's a 2-day trip right there.
Yeah.
Avalon is on the move. If you haven't been to Catalina lately, it's just incredible what they've done with their water line, even as small as it is, millions of visitors. And I'm working with the chamber, at least, and Dan Hoffman to find a kind of a tripartite between San Pedro, Wilmington, and Avalon, because there's so much history there with the Banning brothers, Avalon, and also our waterfront. Of course, the Catalina Express is right in our backyard. So thank you, and also the Civil War drum barracks in Wilmington. I think we cannot ignore that. Want to thank you, Patty, and everyone at LA Tourism for your ongoing efforts. And obviously, as we all know, tourism is our number one industry in the city of LA. We just need to capture those dollars down here. And I'd like to see more convention space, more hotel space down here along our water, because it's the closest you're going to get to the Pacific Ocean.
And I just, in closing, just want to say thank you to all three of you. I know you guys are big champions for tourism. It is an economic driver, and we will continue to work with you and put San Pedro on the map.
And maybe Mr. Bonnet can help us with the line from LAX to a bus line LAX to San Pedro.
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
We appreciate all you're doing in terms of promoting tourism, and that the Tourism and Convention Board is doing. It's great, the report that we had, and so I'd like us to, without objection, adopt the motion to request that the Tourism Convention Board and POLA report back with the marketing strategy as we've talked about.
Well, they failed to show or feature that San Pedro, you can come and you can see tomato sauce made by scratch by Joe's parents.
Right. That's the cultural tourism we're talking about, right?
We'll get that worked into the next round. So let's move on to item number 3. Mr. Espinosa, would you please read item number 3?
Item number 3 is a motion from Council Members Buscaino and Cedillo relative to considering the Port of Palermo, Italy, as a sister or friendship port to the Port of Los Angeles.
Great, and we have one card on this, Mr. Martin Blank. Mr. Martin Blank, would you care to speak on this item?
Since I'm down here, I thought it was on, I guess it must
You don't have to, and I might remind you that there's nothing having to do with wireless on this or any of the other reports
Yeah, but
today.
I'm a big fan of Italy. I used to run conferences there in Sicily, and Palermo is a very, very interesting town. I ran conferences in Erice. Palermo is very similar to San Pedro in having the proximity of a lot of interesting sites, while it itself is an interesting place to visit. Most people who go to Italy go to Rome, and then they go to a couple of places in the north. But Sicily seems to have a bad reputation because of its association with the crime, which is still, I guess, a factor there. But it's a great place, and let me put in a good word for partnership with Italians. They know how to run tourism.
Great. Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on. I'd like to ask, I believe it's going to be Marcela Carballo. It's going to...
Good afternoon, council members, or should I say buongiorno, as we're getting ready to talk about the Port of Palermo in Italy. The port has a rich history in entering into international agreements with our international partners around the world. We look to cultivate trade, business relationships, and best practices. Since 1959, the port has entered into 36 such agreements. So the next steps for entering into a friendship agreement with the Port of Palermo, we're going to be working with the Italian consulate in Los Angeles, Councilmember Buscaino's office, and obviously the Port of Palermo. Those would be our next steps, and my understanding is the Port of Palermo is looking to visit here in early next year, where we'll be able to discuss such items that we can put into our friendship agreement.
Well, this is exciting. I appreciate Marcella. I'm calling you Marcella.
Sure.
And thank you to the port for agreeing to move on this item. And I understand there's a difference between a sister port where we do exchange goods and we do have stronger business relationship. And I do know we also have friendship ports around the world, which is more symbolic on how we can trade ideas, best practices as it relates to in the environment and also tourism. I had an opportunity to meet with the officials at the Port of Palermo at the end of September. They are ecstatic about this effort being made here in Los Angeles. They don't have a relationship with any port around the world. This would be the first. And as you mentioned, they will be here. They'll be in Fort Lauderdale in March during their annual passenger cruise conference, and they're going to make a way to get over here. But the other Italian American on the council, Mr. Bonin, it's with great hopes that we as a city can form this relationship by July of next year. So. We can.
In fact, I think we're going to have the next TCT field hearing is going to have to be in
field
Palermo.
hearing in Palermo, which is an incredible city, and they are known for their amazing tourism efforts and their cruise passenger industry as well.
And good food. Any additional comments? I think we're all excited about this. Without objection, we will move the item, adopt the motion.
And also, just for the record, San Pedro, the home of the largest Italian community in all of Los Angeles, not Southern California. And the reason why there's a lot of individuals that immigrated here from Italy, from Sicily, is because they felt at home. The waterline, the coast, the fishing industry, the movement of goods, and I think it'd be an amazing opportunity to form this relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have item number 4. Mr. Espinosa, would you please read that into the record?
Item number 4 is a motion from Council Members Buscaino and Fuentes relative to including in the Integrated Action Plan per Governor Brown's Executive Order B3215 potential corridor level freight pilot projects in the city that incorporate advanced technologies, alternative fuels, freight and fuel infrastructure, and local economic development opportunities.
Okay, and we have 2 public comment cards on this, Mr. Blank and Mr. Modis. So, Mr. Blank, if you would come forward. Mr. Blank? That's fine, you can go first. So, Mr. Modis?
Yeah. Hi, my name's Kevin Modis. I'm with the Keep Healthy Families Association.
looking at this item, it's going to incorporate advanced technologies. And when we talk about advanced technologies, we're talking usually about wireless technologies now. And I think this committee needs to strongly consider the information. You have an expert from the nationwide expert in wireless health effects, and all these projects are incorporating tremendous amounts of wireless technology. And you are initiating the Wi-Fi across the city program and the Smart Poles program, both using advanced wireless technology. And the FCC guidelines and the FCC themselves are not giving you adequate information regarding health effects. You have an expert in the room that represents 200 scientists from around the world that have thousands of studies showing health effects from wireless. Your projects at the port, your projects of Wi-Fi in the city, all use advanced wireless technology, and they're based on the safety guidelines promoted by the FCC. These guidelines only protect against burning. And what these studies are showing is health effects below burning, before burning. And these are the people being affected are children, pregnant women, people with medical conditions. All are explicitly excluded from these guidelines that are supposed to show safety, and they only cover for burning. You need to strongly look at this. What disturbs me is that I requested meetings, extensive meetings.
I'm sorry, if you could keep to the topic.
With all your offices.
I'm sorry. There's a topic on the table.
Advanced technologies, okay.
It's not just generic advanced technologies. It's about what's being proposed here at the harbor. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to give you as much latitude as I can, but you're going way out of.
Okay, so in terms of the wireless transmitters here in the port, we have a tremendous amount of cell towers and wireless transmitters here that are going to be incorporated in the port's development plan and in this plan to develop the corridor. And all of these expose the citizens nearby to excessive amounts of radio frequency radiation.
There's nothing on this item that has to do with wireless technology. I mean, we're dealing with alternative fuels, freight and fuel infrastructure, and economic development.
Okay, advanced technologies. Which technologies you're referring to in that statement?
But continue. Finish up.
Okay. Most of the advanced technologies are monitored and used and maintained using wireless technology. So while this technology is convenient and effective in some ways, we're not taking into account the health aspect. And as a government body, you have a responsibility to look at this as well. The FCC has failed to do their job. You need to do more of your job. And when in doubt, leave it out. Leave out wireless technology from all these programs.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Mr. Blank. Mr. Blank, so far you've had 3 minutes. Your last item, you just used 1, so you have 2 additional minutes for the remainder of the items.
I'll try not to use too much time because my message is basically the same, but let me emphasize the fact that the advanced technology generally, I mean, we're an enterprising nation. We like to do things and get things done, but very often you move ahead without sufficient knowledge. And when there's a great attraction in getting a new technology, and the problem is that the new technology is frequently a problematic one. And you as a government open yourself up to all kinds of problems when the problems start to come to the surface, and people decide that they may want to sue you for damages that were done being subjected to these things. This happens very frequently, and we don't know too much about the new technologies, but we know enough to know that they haven't been tested adequately. And when you test the background to these new technologies...
Please try to stick to the item.
That's the item. The item is when you understand the advanced technology, the advanced part is usually in advance of sufficient knowledge to know what the limitations are. Every technology has a limitation, and I can't warn you enough as an entrepreneur to be aware of the dangers of going beyond your knowledge and even though everybody else is doing it.
Technology here is about emissions reductions. That's what almost all the technology is discussed as emissions reduction.
Advanced technology is using all the available information about technology. I mean, you put in new wiring, you cut out the wiring. You have people going around without wires doing that. They say, gee, that's a great advance. But the fact is, there's people getting cancers 10 years after going to the park. I mean, you don't need very much of an exposure to get this. I'll not belabor the point, but I'll try and point out that there are advantages to new technologies, but there are disadvantages when it's so new, you don't know what's happening. If you read the history of science, you'll see so many scientists succumbed to dangers that they didn't recognize. The early working of people with radioactive materials. I mean, in the DNA work, the gal who did all the basic work that Watson and Crick cashed in on She died at a very young age, and she was exposed to all the radiation that came from the radioactive material she was using.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Absolutely. Okay, next we'll would like to invite Chris Cannon and Carrie Cartwright to come to the table and talk about this item.
Councilmember, this is, I was going to cover this item in my presentation, which is item 5, if that's okay.
You want to cover both of these?
I'll just cover them both together if that's acceptable to you.
That's fine. Well, you'll do your presentation on both, then we'll do public comment on 5, and then we'll, go ahead.
That's fine. So, you want me to start now, or you have to introduce 5, or do you want to?
Are both of you, okay, we can do 5 then as well. Why don't I take public comment on 5?
Yes.
And then we'll do the presentation on both of them. So
Mr.
on
Chair,
item,
would you like me to read number 5 into the record?
yes, please, Mr. Espinosa.
Item number 5 is a verbal report from the Los Angeles Harbor Department relative to a status update on the department's environment, sustainability efforts, clean air action plan, and the draft zero emissions white paper.
Okay, and public comment cards, we have 2. Mr. Blank, your cumulative 5 minutes has expired. Mr. Modis, you have the floor on this item, if you would like it.
Hi, Kevin Modis, Keep Healthy Families. You cannot talk about environmental sustainability efforts and maintaining a safe environment without talking about exposure to radio frequency radiation. And what the good doctor's point is that cellularly, the effects of radiation from microwave radiation is very similar to the effects of regular radiation. It just takes a lot longer. It's a lot slower. But what we're talking about with microwave radiation is continuous exposure to Wi-Fi in these different projects, people using cellular phones, and all the studies are just looking at one source. In your case, you're exposing people to multiple sources. And relying on the FCC and the agencies that rely on the FCC is a big mistake, because the head of the FCC is the former main lobbyist for the wireless industry and the former CEO of the Wireless Trade Organization. Can you guys hear me? The former CEO of the Wireless Trade Organization. You can't trust their information or sources. They're funding their own studies. They're putting people in positions of power to say that there's no health effects. But the reality is the DWP, Los Angeles' DWP, for their smart meters offers an opt-out. And they offer an opt-out because people got health effects from the smart meters they were putting on their homes. So this is human evidence, and the DWP acknowledging there's a problem by offering an opt-out because people got neurological effects only weeks after having these very low-powered wireless transmitters put on their homes. Now you're talking about putting throughout the city Wi-Fi transmitters that are very low-powered wireless transmitters and exposing people to this type of energy without notifying them of transmitters nearby, without their consent, and without any warning of possible health effects. With the World Health Organization classifying the microwaves from all wireless as a Class 2B carcinogen, it's amazing that government organizations continue to ignore it as a possible health effect.
Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Cannon? Oh, no, I'm sorry, we have one more. We have one, Mr. Kathleen Woodfeld, sorry.
Yes.
With all the moving the cards.
Please
You had an item on number 5, please.
Okay. Well, first of all, I very rarely get to speak before more than one council member, so I really am pleased to have you here, and I'm so very sorry about the sunglasses. I'm talking to you regarding the information that, because I'm prerequisite to the information, I'm sort of doing a shot in the dark, but I hope that you have read about the China Shipping ASJ noncompliance of the port. I represent one of the litigants, the San Pedro Peninsula Homeowners Coalition. We were very shocked and surprised to find out after so many years that there were elements of the ASJ that were not being complied with. And when I say we, I mean really the environmental community as well as the residential community. And I just want to tell you that I that we believe that households have suffered negative consequences because of it, and that it is a very, very important issue to us. So, thank you.
Thank you. And you'll be pleased to know I had a motion on that in council the other day, and we're going to take that up as its own item at the next TCT hearing.
Great.
Where we're going to address specifically the issues in that.
Thank you.
So on this, Mr. Cannon, on items 4 and 5, if you'd like to make your presentation.
Thank you, Councilmember and Councilmember Buscaino and Bonin. It's a pleasure to be able to speak to you today. I'll try to get through these slides in light of the time. I'll try to get through these slides relatively quickly, but I've got a few and some interesting things maybe for us to consider. So with apologies to Councilmember Buscaino, I've actually gone through this with him before, but I thought that it is often interesting to understand for those of you who live here, why is it that we always get the bad rap for why we have bad air quality here? And so I thought I'd take a minute and explain it. This is Los Angeles here. This is the Los Angeles basin. Here is the route to Palm Springs. This is the Port of Los Angeles right here. So if you notice, there are mountains all around here. And these mountains have a lot of cold air. The cold air acts as a barrier. And at night, in fact, the cold air settles down over this basin, and it acts as a lid. You've also got the cool air from the ocean. So you basically have all the air that's generated in here is trapped. So when you have all the emissions from heavy industry and all the variety of different types of things, goods movement and various other things that occur in the LA basin throughout the day and night, it's trapped. It can't go anywhere. And so when the cool air settles down on top of this at night, that lid actually acts like a pressure cooker. And so all those emissions are actually concentrated overnight. And in the morning, when the sun shines, you actually have photochemistry. The sun actually heats up the molecules, causes them to move together, and that's how you get ozone formation. That's why we have more ozone formation in this small area than anywhere else in the state. And it's why we're in extreme non-attainment for ozone. Interestingly enough, this cool air starts to lift as the day goes on because the heat of the sun heats up the ground. So there's more space for the molecules to spread out. So most of the ozone formation occurs in the late morning when you have a lot of sun, but that cool lid hasn't lifted. So that's the biggest reason why we have air quality issues here in Southern California, especially ozone. This is another one that's interesting. This is a mobile air toxic exposure study. It's done, Councilmember Buscaino knows this one. It's done by the AQMD. What this shows is the transition or the trend of air toxins over a 10-year period or an 8-year period from late 90s through 05. And all you really need to know, you don't have to be a scientist, just know that the darker the color, the worse it is. And you can see the worst place is right here in the area around the two ports. And so what that means is heavy industry and issues are related to port operations certainly contribute significantly to air toxics. And it was with this in mind that the Port of Los Angeles, along with the Port of Long Beach, began to develop.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes, sir.
That last graphic there that showed the extreme concentration down here, is that current or is that prior to the Clean Truck Program?
This map is prior to the Clean Truck Program. It's interesting that you asked the question. I actually was trying to move relatively quickly. This is prior to the Clean Truck Program. It got better when we did the Clean Truck Program, actually a lot better, but then it got a lot worse because the state determined that the way we calculate health risk has been wrong. And so the result is they changed the protocols for concentrating health risk. So now the areas there that are a little bit dark, it's a lot broader and it's a lot darker.
So it didn't get worse, it's just the way we calculate it says
that is correct.
Okay,
That's
so
right.
it did improve.
It did improve,
Okay.
yes. So it was even worse.
But it's still
if
bad.
this one had shown that
Right.
calculation, it would have been even worse.
Okay.
So that is correct. So with that in mind, the fact that we've got unique air quality conditions, in particular exposure to air toxics, back about 10 years ago, the two ports identified the main pollution sources at the port. There are the ones you see, the cruise ships, the drayage trucks, the container ships, which are, of course, the biggest source, the trains, cargo handling equipment, and the harbor craft. And we set targets for those. We set targets for those, 22% reduction in NOx by 2014, 93% reduction in SOx, and a DPM reduction of 72%, and then larger reductions in 2023. Also an 85% reduction in health risk. And so these were stretch goals, at least a couple of them, and certainly the ones by 2023. They're things that we thought we could make using technology, and also with new technology. We had a technology advancement program, as well as Port Tech LA, whose their people are here today. And so with that, we began. Councilmember Bonin, this is what you referred to, the Clean Truck Program. We replaced all drayage trucks that operate in the port by banning the older trucks. The program was a great success. The trucks are actually matched to the state DMV and the state registry to confirm that the trucks are indeed as they are represented. Their VIN numbers and so forth are checked. The result was a 95% reduction in pollution from trucks, and it was actually completed 2 years early. Vessel speed reduction is another one. This is something that we did with the ships. It's tracked by GPS and the Marine Exchange, which is the way in which it is confirmed that it exists. We also did shore power. We pioneered the plugging in of ships 11 years ago. We've now worked with the state and international experts, and shore power is now a state regulation that was modeled after work that we did. It's now reported. The ships now have to report plugging into the state. We have encouraged the use of cleaner fuels. We were the ones that pioneered that as well. That is now a federal requirement with the emission control area going out to 200 miles. We have an environmental ship index program, which is an incentive program to bring clean ships here, and other incentive programs as well. Cargo handling equipment, that's actually a photograph of the equipment we have at TrayPack. That's an automated terminal. We certainly have other terminals as well, and we'll talk about the development of terminals in a little bit. But we've seen replacements ahead of regulation, and we've certainly set standards and lease agreements that have helped. We're proud to say that along with Long Beach, we developed the world's first hybrid tugboat. That's the Carolyn Dorothy right there. There's now 2 of them that are operating, and these are between 75 and 85% reduction in emissions. We learned, interestingly, the way this works is most of the time that a tugboat operates, it idles. And it's that idling that generates a lot of emissions. But when it actually needs to push, so it idles using the electricity, but when it needs to push, the diesel engine comes on, and that's when you get about 5,000 horsepower. So you still get the combination of electric and diesel operating when it's needed, but when it's not, it's like one of the Priuses or whatever at a stop sign, it shuts off. So this is, again, a really interesting technology. The locomotives, we work with the switching railroad, PHL, Pacific Harbor Lines. They do all the switching here in the port, and with grants and so forth, we were able to make that switching line the cleanest in the world. They have Tier 3 Plus engines, which is just short of Tier 4, which is now required for purchase of new equipment by the state. But this is, of course, again, something that was begun by us years ago. The result, our emissions inventory that is checked each year with AQMD, the CARB, and EPA. We do it with Long Beach as well. It's QA. That's an 85% reduction in diesel particulate matter, 52% reduction in NOx, 97% reduction in sulfur oxides, diesel greenhouse gas 16, and yet this is with a 7% increase in TUs. So TUs went up, emissions went down. This one is actually not worth getting into the details with. The general trend is down. This is actual information that you can get online at the Cleaner Action Plan website, and what you can get is see that the general trend is down, and these are actual monitors in the community, which shows that the programs we've been doing have worked. We also, as I said, a part of the Cleaner Action Plan is technology advancement. We had to actually push ourselves to develop new technologies, and some of the things that I talked about with the FOSS tugs, and there are others. This is one of the things that we do also is we mentor companies with technologies that are new to the Port of Los Angeles, and some of them have been the ones that have helped us reduce emissions, and so this is a good example.
I want to recognize Stan and Chris, who's in the audience with Port Tech LA. Thanks for your efforts.
Thank you, Stan. So quickly before I continue, we do more than just air quality, but I want to remind you a little bit of what the history of the Port of Los Angeles is. This is the legacy of the port. We began over 100 years ago, and there's a lot of heavy contamination. That's Fish Harbor. This is a wood treatment plant. When the port began 100 years ago, wood treatment and shipyards, liquid bulk, these are all the things that have occurred over the last 100 years. A lot of the work that I do and my group does is dealing with the legacy from this. There's contamination in the sediments, there's contamination in the soils, and a big part of what we do is addressing that. In fact, Joe, you may know this from some talking to a lot of the old timers around here. They tell me that when they needed to clean off the barnacles and stuff off the bottom of their ships, so back in the old days, they would just pull it back into the back harbor and leave it overnight, and after that, everything would just fall right off of it. And I know you know that stuff, Joe, but it's an interesting story. A lot of people don't know that. It was that bad.
Frightening.
So even for the record, look at the water quality today. I know that's your next slide. The water quality today is just incredible.
Well, and that's what I was
start
leading
seeing
to.
sea life now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was leading to. Is that now there's a stark contrast with the work that's been done over the last 20 to 30 years. A lot of best management practices, dealing with vessel discharge, dealing with hot spots from sediment. Now, sediment is what is left over from some of that legacy work and the old heavy industry. So we still have some sediment hot spots, but the water is clean. We actually rarely exceed, if ever, exceed any water quality standards here. You can see we have a wildlife teeming. Port is teeming with wildlife, both wildlife and sediment, there's an example. The upstream watershed are some of the things that we have to deal with aerial deposition and so forth, but these are pictures actually from port underwater photography. One of the programs that I'm very proud of, one of the many programs I'm proud of, we actually do a tenant audit. We go out to all of our tenants, or a high percentage of them, and we do a friendly audit. We aren't there to rat on them. We sit and tell them about all different ways in which they can comply with surface water runoff and other Clean Water Act issues. And it works really well. At first they were nervous when we did it. They wondered why we were there, but now they actually look forward to us coming because they realize that we're not there to get them in trouble, but rather to help them. So this is an example. It's a picture of one of them. Rachel McPherson there is on the right. She's a member of our staff. Is that Carter? I think it might even be Carter. I can't tell who that is. But anyway, it's a member of our staff, Rachel. Sediment, as I said, remains a concern for us because of legacy contamination. So TMDL's total maximum daily load remains a big priority for my team and a concern for the port because of the potential liability, but that's a big issue that we deal with. And as I said, just an example of the kinds of things that are growing here, both vegetation and critters. I draw particular attention to the lease terns that are out at the edge of Pier 400. They're federally protected, and if you ever want to come down here and see them during lease turn, the season when they're when the little critters are out, the little ones are hatching, it's really exciting to see them, so we can make a special trip for you. So having said all that, we also have to deal with all the contamination in the soils. These are I have a whole team that addresses soil contamination, and so that's part of our work. One of the things we're very proud of is we received a certification, ISO certification implemented by our construction and maintenance division, deals with our protocols and procedures for operations. We're the first container port in the United States to be ISO certified, and it's something we're very proud of. This has been talked about, so I don't have to spend a lot of time. I'll just say this. Part of protecting the environment is recognizing that the environment includes the area around the port, that contributing to the well-being of the community around the port, that's sustainability in our minds. And so these are examples of things that we've done. I've talked about them. I don't need to spend time with them. This is a big one that we did, the buffer, as you know, over in Wilmington. I want to draw attention to Wilmington. And then this is what it looks like now. So these are important. So I want to just mention what we see are...
Cost of that park? Like
I'm sorry?
73 million?
That's right.
Investment?
That's right.
Amazing.
That's right. And it remains something we're particularly proud of, and something that we enjoy actually having people come and visit. When they come and visit the port, we make sure that they come and see it. It is an award-winning park. That is correct. So one thing I want to talk about, so what do we got coming forward? Cargo volumes are not increasing, which reduces revenues. Shipping alliances now exist where they didn't before, and so they're focused on cost. Increased environmental controls could affect competitiveness. We still need to do community investment because it's part of our mission, and environmental permitting can be slow. And the technical issues, as our cargo volumes increase, those targets that I showed stay the same. So to keep the targets the same with more volume, you actually have to have emissions per container go down. And so that makes our work all the more difficult. Climate change, we watch it seems every month, certainly a couple times a year, you read about something bizarre that happens with weather. The hurricane that formed off the coast of Mexico seemed to be all of a sudden, everybody wondered what happened. How did this turn out to be the worst hurricane that we've seen in this hemisphere? There are other types of weather in other parts of the world where we ask ourselves, wow, how did that happen? You know what it is? It's climate change. And it means in our minds that the single worst environmental crisis facing the world today is climate change. And as a result, we have to focus on reduction of greenhouse gas. Our mayor has set strong standards. Councilmember Buscaino has pushed us to be leaders in this. The governor and even the president, and I actually say even the Pope, has had things to say about this. And so this is an important issue. If we reduce dependence on combustion-based engine technologies and the use of electricity, it means we have to do a lot of energy planning. And the last bullet there is not the least. It is supply chain efficiency. We have to be smarter about how we move goods. It used to be that we could just dump a bunch of containers on a terminal and they'd sort them out and figure it out. Well, now with 14,000 TEU ships, when you dump a bunch of containers on a terminal, it's chaos. And so we need to be much more organized with the way we move containers, the way we load ships, with the way we stage ships to arrive, the way we unload them, the way we move cargo off the terminals, and the way we move them on into markets. And we need to pay attention, minimize the number of moves, maximize the amount of efficiency, and that will help me, the environmental guy, because that'll reduce emissions, and it'll also reduce our carbon footprint. So we're, as you know, Councilmember Buscaino is involved very much being with the AQMD. We're doing a Clean Air Action Plan update. The main areas that we're looking at, we're going to continue to do our mobile and stationary source strategy. Zero emissions is something that we're going to have to do in the very near future, and near zero emissions, I mentioned greenhouse gas. Energy planning, we want to try and find a way to set some targets and maybe even metrics for how we improve our energy efficiency and, again, supply chain efficiencies. So far, what we're doing is reaching out to our industry partners. You can see the list there. We recently had a public workshop over at Banning's Landing, which I thought went very well. There was very good discussion. Over 100 people attended. This week, we're going to have another meeting, our second meeting with the regulatory agencies, and so we're actually looking forward to meeting with them. That's the EPA, AQMD, South Coast Air Quality Management District, and others. And so we anticipate that we will have something to report about all of this and with programs that we can begin to develop in the early January, but we don't expect to have anything finalized and presented to our boards until sometime late in next year. So this is what we've heard so far. We need more emission reductions and new goals, but yet significant investments have already been made. So how is it you're going to ask us to do more? Yes, we know we have some zero emissions technology, but there's nothing commercial. Where do we buy it? And finally, new technologies, especially when they require new procedures, can pose operational challenges. So what we're wrestling with is how do we get to zero emissions? We all know that it is critical that we get to zero emissions. What we're hearing from the community is you need to strike a balance. You need to go with short-term environmental goals and also understand that zero emissions is long-term. How do we prioritize our strategies? That's it. How do we balance the environment with economic competitiveness? This is something, and I'll keep going in the interest of time, but the two ports began with a zero emissions roadmap in 2011 and focused us all on this very goal. The Port of Los Angeles has now developed its own program. We recently released a zero emissions white paper, which I encourage you to take a look at. It establishes our role. It urges that over a 5-year period we facilitate the testing, expanded testing and development of this equipment. We establish clear guidelines and procedures that we develop an infrastructure plan and include it as part of our capital improvement program. We work with regional stakeholders on testing and development. We think up to 40 new zero-emission vehicles can be introduced per year through port efforts for testing for a total of 200 over a course of a 5-year period. So this is something that we're doing. This Councilmember Blumenfeld is the freight pilot project idea I referred to. What happened was all these different programs are going on. The state of California is doing their sustainable freight strategy. Caltrans is doing a freight mobility planning. Metro is doing planning. And so the government said what we need is to come up with pilot project ideas, essentially have all these agencies come together and kind of work on pilot projects together. Ours is we're going to submit our ideas through Metro. We've got a countywide zero emissions collaborative, which, as you can see, includes Long Beach and LA and Metro. And so we're going to provide suggested recommendation or programs for that through them. These are some of the things that are under discussion. Something called Freight Advanced Traveler Information System. Essentially, it coordinates with all of the trucks so that they all can communicate through radio frequency and can essentially coordinate their movements. We want to use this to also introduce more zero and near zero emission technologies. We're looking at another program of about 50 trucks. Smart corridors and smart freeways and arterial corridors. This is essentially coordinating everything from street lights to other types of logistics controlling strategies. Essentially, it allows you to be smarter. It's like, essentially having the streetlights coordinated as you drive downtown. It's a similar idea, but it's much more broader and complex. And finally, equipping the Fratus trucks with the zero and near zero emissions trucks to communicate. So essentially integrates all of those ideas into one. I wouldn't want to stop. I just got back from China. I spent 2.5 weeks in China, and it was to celebrate our Pacific Ports Cleaner. Actually, it's a friendship agreement with the Port of Shanghai. It's our 10-year anniversary of that. And we also had a Pacific Ports Cleaner collaborative meeting where a lot of us met and talked about air quality issues. Leading on the leading thing there were alternative fueled yard equipment. China is interested in developing an ECA, which we're very pleased to hear. They're very interested in environmental. That's the emissions compliance area that I referred to earlier, which goes out 200 miles. It's something that we have here, and we're glad to hear that they're doing it on that end. Shore Power, we have an ECHO partnership with them. That's something through the U.S. State Department, but also something that they're coordinating with us on, and so something that we're working at Port of Shanghai. These are other things that we've done. So I will end with this, that we believe our role at the port is going to have to change. We used to just be a landlord and collect rents. But now we're going to have to start partner, and some of the things that I talked about with coordination with trucking and coordination with shipping and loading and unloading, these are things that we're going to have to get involved in an active way. We believe deeper collaboration and broader dialogue with the supply chain stakeholders is going to be important. It's the only way to make that work. All the people who normally didn't talk to each other before now have to coordinate. We have a discussion agreement with the Port of Long Beach, and so a lot of this is issues that we're discussing with them and coordinating with them. And as I said, we've got some critical environmental needs, not the least of which is greenhouse gas, and we must still remain competitive. So I will end my presentation there, Council Member, and if you have any questions, I'll take them.
A lot of stuff there, and good stuff to hear that the port's doing on lowering our emissions and really trying to be an environmental steward, which I'm very grateful that you're moving such a positive direction. Some of the cap and trade money, is that going to be a possibility to, because there's a lot of ambitious proposals. You've got some for Metro, some for potentially Measure R. How does cap and trade fit into that?
Very prominently. We just proposed along with AQMD and Long Beach, proposed, I think it was 40 trucks in cap and trade fund, a cap and trade program that was offered in September, and that's zero emission trucks. We did another program that was in October for a really interesting something we're doing over at Pasha Terminal, and I'll take 30 seconds to explain it to you because we're excited about it. It's an opportunity to have Pasha be able to operate as a microgrid. So we're going to combine solar power, battery storage, a 1 megawatt battery storage, and a electricity control system, and a series of zero emission technology pieces of equipment that can actually plug in and be charged by this combination battery and solar power system, so they could operate off the grid. And the Department of Defense is actually really excited about this. It's only short term off the grid now, but the idea is that it demonstrates something that works and could work more. And most importantly, Pasha is a relatively medium-sized terminal, so what they're proposing could apply anywhere, to warehouses, to distribution centers, to any other type of equipment and any other type of facility. So we believe that it's a very exciting program, and that's a cap and trade program at Well. We're very excited. Councilmember Buscaino has been a big supporter of our efforts there and been helping us to coordinate with the state. So yes, we have another one that's coming up in January. You may have heard, let's see, I guess Mike Galvin mentioned we're going to try and get some zero emission trolleys. So that's something we're going for. And then in the spring, there's a cargo handling offering that we're going to go crazy and go after as well. So a lot of cap and trade. We're also looking at CEC funding. And as I mentioned, the Department of Defense and others are interested in some of our work. So absolutely.
And if you get that storage, figured out, I mean, that's the holy grail for renewable energy is the storage pieces. So, who's going to?
Just briefly, I know we're running out of time here, but Mr. Cannon, the Port of Los Angeles, just incredible efforts that have been made thus far in reducing emissions. And the slide that really stood out for me was the fact that we, in a time where we've upped the volume at the port, we've lowered emissions. And I've seen this port grow, growing up here in San Pedro. My folks on Alma over a view of the port. There was a time where we were able to see the Santa Margarita Mountains clearly, and now it's blocked by the cranes, which is a sign of our local national economy. And sharing the stories of my brother-in-law, who was a dock worker. 10 years ago, he'd come home with soot on him, and today that soot's no longer there. He's comes home after a shift, the dock's cleaner than ever. Just one point I want to clarify, that the port has done this on their own. These are all voluntary measures and successes, right? Without any regulatory agencies demanding this change.
No, these are all programs that were the key word, and Councilman Buscaino, this is something you've told us about, which is collaboration.
Right.
We worked with industry. We worked with a number of them, and yes, these are all.
And our end goal,
programs.
of course, is to get to zero emissions. And I believe this is a great opportunity to seek more green jobs and look at Port Tech LA and others turning to Altasea, where we can find the best and brightest around the world to help find the technology that we need to get to the end game, which is zero emissions. And I know the bonnet that's been approved by CARB, and for those terminals that's not amped equipped, now the what's it called, ASICs or?
Yeah, and I was trying to go fast because I could talk for an hour and a half, 2 hours about my work because I enjoy it. The bonnet,
that's another technology.
Yeah, it's a sock. We call it a sock on a stack. Essentially, if you don't plug in, we've got a thing that
on a barge.
It's on a barge. It fits over the stack, and it has a vacuum and takes the emissions.
Yeah.
There's two of them. One developed. Well, we actually supported both of them, to be honest with you. But their program, one that was developed in our West Basin area, and the other we supported with funding, but was developed elsewhere. They both have been approved by CARB.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great stuff. Appreciate you presenting on it, and we're going to want to follow it closely as we move forward. So we have 2 votes in front of us. One for item 4. Without objection, I'd like to adopt the motion that's requesting the Harbor Commission to report on the corridor level freight pilot projects. Without objection. And then item 5 is a note and file. Without objection, is so ordered. And Mr. Espinosa, that takes us through all the items. Is that correct? And now we have. So thank you again very much. Really thank everybody who's made these great presentations. We have some general public comment cards before we conclude this meeting, and I believe we have 7 of them. So we'll do 1 minute each for each card, and we'll start with Dr. Martin Blank. Sorry, I'm sorry. Please, Mr. Blank. You used your time in the items, and for public comment it's a different clock. So you have a minute for public comment, which is on any item that comes before the non-agenda, any item that's not on our agenda. You have a minute to talk about it. I'm sorry, his microphone is not working.
Well, I'll speak out loud.
Let's get your microphone working. Is it working now?
I believe so.
Restart his clock? Okay.
Yeah. Well, no, I believe the question of electromagnetic radiation is something that we all must cope with. It's growing, it's dangerous, and nobody's really paying attention because there's a lot of money to be made, number one, and it's a very enjoyable medium, and we all enjoy using it. So it's mesmerizing. But we've got to control ourselves and develop reasonable controls for these emissions because they are bad. So I hope we keep that in mind as we move forward with all this economic development.
Great. Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Shanita Lopez. Shanita Lopez. She's not responding, so we'll continue. Shanita Lopez. Next we have, looks like Jeffrey Wary or Wanny? Wary, sorry.
My name is Jeffrey Wary, and thank you for taking the time. But I oppose wireless Wi-Fi as well because, like I said earlier, that because of radiation and things that cause that, in just a little thing as a Bluetooth, just imagine what you put out there in the air in a cell tower like that. There's a lot of things going on out there that doesn't help us at all. So, but when a cell tower is installed with only a single wireless transmitter, every resident within 500 feet is notified, and they are invited to a meeting to give their input regarding any decision being made. Residents within 500 feet of these wireless Wi-Fi transmitters are not being notified or having input. Wi-Fi does not fall under the 1996 Telecommunication Act, gagging consideration of health and safety for cell towers because Wi-Fi is inherently a local enterprise and not part of a national network. Thank you, sir.
Next we have Kevin Modis, followed by Daniel Rabin.
Okay, please listen. I gave you 2 handouts. I gave you this thicker handout and a smaller one from the Parliamentary Assembly. So the Parliamentary Assembly of Europe passed a resolution 1815 that recognizes that we're not looking at biological health effects. It recommends to all European countries that they minimize people's radio frequency radiation exposure. It recommends wired connections. The second page is the recommendations. It recommends wired connections rather than wireless connections for children. It recognizes that people are electrosensitive. They develop neurological symptoms from radio frequency radiation exposure. It recommends we lower our standards. Austria has standards that are 100,000 times lower than ours because they recognize biological effects. If you look at the bigger handout, it's a 50-page handout. What you'll notice is Italy, by the way, has banned Wi-Fi from kindergarten since recommending less than it. France has banned Wi-Fi from their nursery schools. Other countries' governments are moving to minimize people's exposure to Wi-Fi. Wi-Fiing our city is a huge mistake. Putting smart poles near people
Thank you, sir. Your time has expired.
is a huge public threat. And there, in this European Assembly
Sir,
resolution...
Sir, I have to be fair to each person. I let you go on for a minute and 30 seconds. Your time was a minute. I apologize if I'm not fair. Stop. Sir, sit down, please. Sergeants, I'm sorry. I need to be fair to all folks. I cannot have someone hijack this and just start talking and talking. We have to keep fair. Next person, Daniel Rabin. I'll have... Please stop disrupting the meeting. Daniel?
I oppose city Wi-Fi when a cell tower is installed with only a single wireless transmitter. Every resident within 500 feet is notified, and they are invited to a meeting to give their input regarding any decision being made. Residents within 500 feet of these wireless Wi-Fi transmitters are not being notified or having input. Wi-Fi does not fall under the 1996 Telecommunication Act, gagging consideration of health and safety for cell towers because Wi-Fi is inherently a local enterprise and not part of a national network. You can talk and consider the health and safety of the Wi-Fi. Don't you wonder why they had a gag order or had a gag consideration of health and safety of cell towers if they were not real health and safety dangers? You are taking the word of the FFC that their technology is safe. FFC's new chairman is the former Maine lobbyist. Thank you.
Thank you. You can finish your sentence. Go ahead.
I turned the page. Can't find it.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
John Maldonado.
Thank you for your time. I oppose citywide Wi-Fi, and so should you. Dr. Blank would agree.
Could you pull your mic down a little bit? If you could restart his time. Could you pull your mic down so that we can hear you?
I'm short. Sorry.
Thank you, sir.
There are neurological sensitive people who cannot be in the vicinity of wireless radiation transmitters. They're called electro hypersensitive. Getting feedback? Sensitive individuals, or AHS. Just look at microwave syndrome. These individuals will be made sick. Oh, sorry. Sorry. A little embarrassed. These individuals will be made sick by your plan, denied access to streets and public spaces, driven out of the city they love, violating their basic rights as citizens. Sweden has recognized electro-hypersensitivity as a disability, and Austria has trained their doctors to treat it. Here in the U.S., we are making the problem much worse, exposing more of the population to more sources of wireless radiation and for longer or continuous periods of time. We have to wake up to the wireless radiation health effects. Wi-Fi in the city will make more people neurologically sensitive with increased exposure. We are informing our young workers, and we should learn of these individuals sensitive to wireless radiation, that these wireless microwaves. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. And the last card is Mr. Anthony Nizetich.
San Pedro legend, Anthony Nizetich with the end.
Right.
A legend amongst us.
A legend?
Yes, sir.
I could change that word. But I'm only going to be a few minutes, and I'm going to be very succinct and want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I was part of the greatest generation of the 20th century that was participated in making the Port of Los Angeles the greatest trading community and also the greatest fishing industry in the world, okay? So now, those were the two, what they call the economic engine for the city of Los Angeles. They made the money, bring the taxes in and everything. So the only opportunity that we have with 187 acres of land, that's the largest single undeveloped land in the city of Los Angeles. And I think that the only way we can do that is with entertainment. And so our
Just finish your
our
sentence.
trading port should be maintained as the best, the largest and the best trading port in the United States.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
But I'm not finished.
I know. Unfortunately, I have to limit everybody to the same amount of time.
Okay, then I just want you to know that your economic engine for the 21st century is entertainment, period. And
Thank you, sir.
multi-ethnic participation.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Buscaino, and everyone who is
you.
still here.
Thanks to our hosts as well.
Thank you very much to the hosts and to the port for making this field hearing possible. It's been long, but I think very productive. And with that, this meeting is hereby adjourned.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yes, especially Stephanie.
Thanks, Councilman Bloomfield.